You're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. I'm Chris, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Clem.
Hi, everybody.
And my good friend Mark.
Hey, what's happening?
And we're very lucky to be joined by new pod all-star, MUPLore, champion, let's say. That didn't sound right, but you get the idea. Tom Freeman. Hey, Tom.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be on. I've been listening to the show for a while, so really delighted to be asked on tonight.
Thanks so much for joining us, buddy. So genuinely what happened, dear listener, is I listened to the new MUPLore with Walt, obviously, a couple of hours ago, and literally just messaged Tom to say, Tom, do you want to come on another massive episode of MUP? And very happily he agreed. So, Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
No, I'm absolutely delighted. It's great, and I'll talk about wargaming until, the cows come home. So, delighted.
Until midnight on a Sunday night, which is what we normally do.
Well, we're off tomorrow for May Day, so I don't have a curfew.
Oh, bless you! I'm giving a presentation tomorrow morning. Oh, okay,
really?
Super. Oh well, there we go. Super. And guys, you'll notice whenever I don't have Clem or Mark on the pod, I'm never sure how to start the pod because I always say, when as ever, here's my good friend Clem, my good friend Mark. And if you're not here, I get very stuck. But there you go. So, dear listener, what are we going to talk about today? So
you need an imaginary friend, and my good friend Chris too. Hello, Chris too.
Maybe a sock puppet.
That's
possibly
a good one too. Yeah.
Puppet.
This is a really show on that podcast, but I'm sure it would work very well.
Dear listener, if this is the conversation we're having 2 minutes into the pod, just imagine what it would be like 3 hours in. That's all I'll say. Super. So let's try and get through the on the menu, guys, and then you can make fun of me, okay? So on the menu, so we're going to talk. So welcome on the menu. That's what we're doing now, dear listener. We have our intro, Mantic news, our Warpath, Firefight, and Clem. We've actually got something to say this month, which is very exciting. A Warpath Deadzone, our Pannilore Kings of War, our Pannilore, which is the Trident realm lore. And spoiler alert, dear listener, I got confused and read the wrong lore. But there we go. We'll just, we'll see how we go.
Well, so we're going to sum it up, but just tell the dear listener what they're going to hear, Chris.
Oh, yes. So it's going to be some Trident realm lore and a little bit of Night Stalkers lore because I read the wrong thing. And then we'll go into listener questions. And then our topic of the month this month is wargaming as a hobby with an emphasis on Mantic, I very much imagine. And then we're going to start talking. That's it. The other thing is secret. We're not talking about it.
It's top secrets. We will do that later.
Right. Very good. Very good. How tantalizing.
Almost spoiled the surprise, Chris, but we made it just correct.
There you go. And we might toss in listener questions too if we get around to it. So.
Oh, I thought we mentioned that.
Did we mention that already? All right, my apologies.
No worries, buddy. Super. So, guys, let's introduce our guests. So, Tom, you introduced yourself on an episode of MUPLore, which actually dropped just a couple of hours ago. But if you want to just very, very quickly repeat yourself for the dear listener and give us a quick intro into your journey into the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat myself too much. As you say, I've already talked about it a bit on MUPLore. But obviously, as you can tell from my accent, I'm in Scotland, in the UK. And I guess first and foremost, I'm a role player rather than a war gamer. I've certainly been playing tabletop role-playing games for a long time now, and a lot of different kinds as well. And I guess my wargaming sort of fell by the wayside for over 30 years, and my all-metal and badly painted Skaven army, it gathered dust before I eventually sold it. And to be completely honest with you guys, I didn't really regret it, until now, I should say. And then I guess if you fast forward to last year, I had continued to do role playing, and it was always about making cool stories for me, But I decided that painting miniatures would be a nice little sort of relaxing, mindful thing to do. Just the odd character for D&D or whatever, you understand. But I walked past my local gaming store here in Dunfermline in Scotland, Accent Games, and in the window they only had these little space rat men that I'd always dreamed of. You know, I'd never really got into 40k because I just seemed like lots and lots of space marines, and there wasn't really this sort of fantasy in space that I'd always dreamed of. And I saw these little rat men in the window, and I thought, wow. And they were sort of in this cyberpunk city setting, and I thought to myself, God, I have to paint that, you know. And then when I bought the game system, I was absolutely blown away by it. This was sort of early last year. And that was obviously Deadzone. I'm guessing all your listeners worked it out. And it was accessible enough for my daughter to play, but it also had that kind of tactical depth that you want from a war game. But I guess the most exciting thing about it was that it was just fun. It's just a fun game. And that's kind of what hooked me back into wargaming. And then I sort of lurked around Kings of War for about a year. I listened to you guys, and I always sort of thought, oh God, it's very serious, it's very tournament based. And then Walt came on the show, and he was talking about the narrative and everything, and I thought, you know what, I quite fancy playing this, but maybe the old world's coming, maybe I should. And then obviously the old world came out, and I thought, nah, that's not for me. It sort of encouraged me, I guess, to take the plunge into Kings of War, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm already on my third faction, and I only started in February. So
it's so addictive, though, isn't it, Tom? It's so easy really to go in with both feet. And it's funny you mention the fun aspect of Mantic games because, you know, being in the game store and seeing other people playing other games, it's amazing how many of them don't look like they're having any fun. It looks like they're doing work or some sort of obligation. Yeah. You know, they're reading a book, you know, they're discussing the rules, whereas we're just chucking dice and laughing at each other. And it's amazing how something like, you know, playing with tabletop games with armies of monsters or whatever, that fun sometimes gets forgotten about. It seems like a very strange thing, but it's definitely true.
I couldn't agree more, Chris, because I think for me, I remember playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle. It was only a book at that stage, a book that cost me £13 out of Virgin Records. And it took me, we all built our armies, and it took me about 3 days to do a battle. And we kept getting bored, and I mean, we were very young, kept getting bored and going off and doing other things, and it really wasn't the story of the battle kind of got left by the wayside, and that's the thing. But also, I always
wasn't
wanted,
it?
You know?
It was pitched as a role-playing game, if I remembering this right. It was a fantasy role-playing battle, so the rules getting in the way of the story of the game is a strange situation to be in, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it had just moved on from that. So the third edition book was definitely its first foray into being a proper war game. I'd seen my uncles play historical war games and so on, and I knew what a war game was. But I was a bit intimidated by it. I probably still am. But I think that the beauty of the Mantic rules is that the game moves quickly enough for you to actually create that narrative in your head. And so when the dice do something funky, in fact, I think you guys talked about this a couple of episodes ago. When the dice do something funky, it creates a narrative right there and then. And Deadzone's absolutely fantastic about that, because you can have your weakest unit take down the strongest unit in the game just with the exploding eights and everything. And what a cool story that makes, you know. And I love games like that where, you know, there's tactics, but there's also that element of chance that creates dramatic moments in games. And so far, you know, Mantic have been absolutely perfect at pitching that. And I've heard Ronnie talk about it as well in interviews. He knows what he's doing, I think.
Fantastic. Super. Super fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us. So should we move on to
you're in the right place. I mean,
yeah,
we share exactly this vision, obviously. So yeah, welcome on board.
Pleasure.
Fantastic. Yeah, good point, Clem. Super. So should we move on to Mantic News? Oh, maybe we count this as Mantic News. Yes, in the Facebook group, dear listener, we've hit 200 people, which felt cool. You know, That's the thing. That's more than we started with. I think we started with about 20. Oh, and I'm pretty sure it's not in the notes, Clem, but I'm pretty sure MUP is 2 years old.
That's about right.
Yeah.
I guess.
Congratulations, us.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Happy anniversary, guys.
Yeah, that was good.
But what do you think, guys? Are you jaded about doing, suffering from burnout, or are you excited for more?
I mean, it's still a good time chatting about toy soldiers and the fun we're having with good friends. So, there's also always new games we play. We've played new models we paint, new faces, new friends along the way. So I could see myself keep going for a while.
Oh yeah, I'm sitting here scraping and cleaning a miniature. So, we're ready for more. Absolutely.
And it's always the episodes where we think, oh God, we've got nothing to talk about and we haven't made notes, where we end up talking for 4 hours. It's I'm very much enjoying it. I mean, the whole thing about MUP is just doing it with your friends and just having an excuse to chat on a monthly basis with your friends about your hobby is always good, dear listener. Super. So Mantic news, guys. So we knew about it quite a while ago now, hence we started advertising Baron of Dice on the pod. But it's official. They've done a partnership with Mantic, and they're making Kings of War dice. What do we think? Have we seen them?
Yeah, I think they look really cool. I mean, I'm obviously a noob and I'm enthusiastic about absolutely everything. But I think they look really cool. I like the sixes are all the emblems of each faction for Kings of War. If I hadn't just bought an enormous amount of six-sided dice for Kings of War, I probably would have already ordered these, but they do look very cool.
I would say they are, I think there's no getting around it. They are expensive for dice, but they are very much luxury dice. You know, when you get them and you hold them and you look at them, they are really, really nice, and D6s work for so many different games. If you pick up one set, you'll be, rolling these lovely dice every game from now on. So they are pricey, but they are fantastic. Clem?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I've got a free set a long time ago, actually, when we started the, let's say, partnership. And indeed, very good quality dice, really lovely. And although I already have some free dice from them, I'm going to buy some more. So if that's an indication, I think that should tell you something. The other thing I wanted to mention, and we kind of have a rule of no GW bashing, but the other day I was at my Friendly Gaming local store, and just out of curiosity, I was like, let's check how much GW charges for dice. And I'll let you guys have a look, and when you compare that to Baron of Dice, you'll see that they're not that expensive after all. Like, they're significantly cheaper.
Yeah, they're probably cheaper. So, but if they would have had them at Adepticon, I would have probably bought some. So, but that booth at Adepticon for Baron of Dice was just crawling the entire week. So it was unbelievable. So they're great dice, and they make a whole bunch of them. So I'm glad that they're making Kings of War. The one comment I had was, what? They didn't do all the factions. And then somebody mentioned orcs and goblins with the same dice. So, but I think it's got the goblin symbol. But the really neat thing is they've taken the symbol that they have in the rule book and they've put it on the die, which is really, really cool. So.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat as Clem. I got some free ones, but I'm going to be buying some Northern Alliance ones with my real money, with my own money, because they are that nice.
Well, Chris, just remember to use your MUP discount code.
Yes, 5% discount. Although I think if we do that, like last time, I got burned with a huge amount of tax and postage costs. So although the dice were free, it did stack up for me. So this time I'm going to wait until they come to a German distributor and just order from there. So yeah. I can try and ask if they'll take my MUP discount code, but I think no.
might be harder. No, I think if you're in the EU, you should most likely buy it from a local retailer. You might have to ask them to have the Kings of War specific dice, because I'm not sure they've been added to all distributors yet, but it's a lot safer. Otherwise, if you import from the US, you'll pay custom and taxes, and the worst part is you never really know how much you're going to pay, right? Like if you knew beforehand, that's how much more I will pay, you can make a decision, but it's kind of the lottery, like the bad kind of lottery.
If I'm honest, I paid more than if I'd have just bought the dice from Germany from a shop paying full retail price. But still, Clem, it's the fun of getting them, we're getting free dice.
They're free.
It's how they get you,
It's like free pizza, right? It's like, yeah, sure, I'll stay overnight, like work overtime. I'm getting free pizza, right? How cool can that be, right? Of course, I'm working 3 hours more.
Or free beer in the work fridge. Like, why would I want to stay late to have a beer or a glass of wine at work? Why? What? Brilliant. Anyway, we feel like we're getting slightly off topic, but good point, Clem. So, guys, yes, and I actually, while we're talking about Baron of Dice, I do wish they made and I don't know what size it is, but I do wish they made the slightly smaller dice size. Because I do like the slightly smaller ones, because I've got some really nice okie dokie dice, slightly smaller. And then when you're rolling buckets of dice, it does just feel slightly easier. But
that makes sense.
Dear listener, Baron of Dice dice are great.
Sorry, come. Also, the feeling of the slightly smaller dice, I like that in Kings of War, because it makes you feel like you're a god deciding the fates of these beings.
Mere mortals.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I like that.
Especially if you're going into a flank, or even if you're lucky and you're going into behind someone and you're just picking up a whole bucket load of dice in your hands. There's a really nice feeling about that. Which I
there's a psychological warfare to it, right? Like, even if I rear charge you with a horde of goblins, I'm hitting on 6s because I'm a shitty goblin hindered. But I do roll so many dice that I will make it very obvious to you that I'm rolling a lot of dice.
Exactly. And I think that for me, that's what it's all about. Like, I'm not going to do the maths before I do it. I'm going to go, oh yeah, I'm going to roll lots of dice there. I want to do that, which is probably why I don't do too well at Kings of War games, because I'm not doing the maths. But yeah, it's great fun and it's a great feeling.
Well, you're doing great if you're having a good time. It's just a question of metric. Like, what's your metric?
Exactly.
Yeah. No, Tom, maths, I'm pretty sure that's just sorcery. Just go with what feels right in the moment. What would you
Borderline
guys
cheating.
Do? Borderline cheating. Exactly, Clem. Well,
I do run halflings, so sorcery has a whole different meaning. It's all about condiments.
Oh, I like it. Exactly, Clem. If you're playing someone and they're going, okay, well, it's a hindered charge, so I'm probably going to get, 10 hits, and then I'm probably going to get 4 wounds through. No, I won't charge. Like, no, come on, they're mighty warriors. Of course they charge there.
Yeah, I laid a trap right there. Why don't you just run head first into my trap?
Clem. You're rolling, you've got 20 attacks. That's 20 wounds, right?
Sometimes, yes.
Super. Okay, guys. So Halo. The pre-order window is closed, I think. I backed it. I think we've got a question on this to come later, so I'll be careful with what I say, so I'm not repeating myself, dear listener, believe it or not. I think one thing I was thinking about was I like Halo. I think Mantic have actually been a little bit unlucky in as much as they've timed this Halo game beautifully along with the Halo big budget TV series. And of course, you'd hope that would bring a load of new people in. So you're paying for this expensive license, but hopefully you can, benefit from this TV series. Now, I did actually purchase the whole of the first series of that because, as I said, I'm a Halo fan. I think I've watched about 2.5 episodes. And I've tried about 3 times to come back to it and go, oh, come on, let's give it another go. But I'll be honest, I'm not really enjoying it. And I sort of want to compare that really. And the second series has just come out and it hasn't been particularly well received, albeit, as I said, I haven't seen it yet, the second series. And I just wanted to compare that with a company called Modifius, who make the Fallout miniatures game. Now, their miniatures game, I actually have a pretty big collection of it. It is very, for better or for worse, very, very, very complicated. So it's really, really hard. To play the game, you need to read about 4 or 5 different booklets. Now, so the people that get over the learning hump and start playing the game naturally love the game. but it's very, very hard to get into it. So what they've actually done with the Fallout series coming out is that they've introduced another game where they hired the guy who made Necromundo and a few other, very well-known games, and they've just made, I think it's called Fallout Factions. And it's got a massive campaign-based system, but the game itself is much, much simpler than the big Fallout Wasteland Warfare game. So I feel like, and obviously you can use all your existing miniatures for this new game, and all the rules are free online, etc. So I think they've been super, super lucky, because the Fallout TV show is amazing, but also really smart. Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's a lot of people in my local club playing that Fallout game. I think it has got its audience, and I would suggest that audience isn't necessarily anything to do with the TV show. They're fans of the video game and the setting and so on. But I did notice, as well as the sort of offshoot that you're talking about, they did introduce miniatures of characters from the TV show for Fallout Wasteland as well. So there's a kind of they're splitting both hairs there, if you like, and I think people will buy those. Obviously, I think it's been better received than the Halo TV show, so it's maybe not fair to compare them. But I did notice that they did release those miniatures of the characters from the show, and they look really good. They're good sculpts.
Yeah, I've pre-ordered them. Clem?
I just wanted to say two things. Does this Fallout game exist in 10 mil, and is it better than Interest? I'm teasing, obviously.
And no. Mark?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Fallout Factions was written by James Hewitt, who also wrote Dreadball, and was actually our very first contact, and worked at Mantic, and he was the guy we talked to a lot on Mantic Radio. So I met with James at Adepticon, and he will be joining us here on MUP at a future date. So stay tuned.
Sometimes, dear listener, it's lovely to hear exciting news at the same time as the dear listener. That's really, really great. Clem, did you hear that? The guy that wrote it is the same guy that made Dreadball. Also, he's coming on the pod.
That's good news. No, I went to close the door and turn the light on, so I missed that part.
Thanks, Mark.
Nice.
No problem.
That sounds
if you were
good.
paying attention in the uptick of all the future guests coming up, he's in there. So
I don't know who you think you're talking to, Mark.
There was paying attention in your name, Chris, in the same sentence, so obviously a mistake.
There you go.
Yeah,
exactly. I try.
Chris, attention to detail, Thomas. But the other thing I wanted to sort of mention, actually, is that the Fallout TV show is brilliant, dear listener. It really is. They've made so they've taken an extremely compelling universe and they haven't worried so much about the game. Sometimes these things they're worried about what the sweaty nerds like me think about it. Oh, that's not the Fallout game. That's not how it works. They've just taken this very interesting universe and then made a fantastic TV show around it, right? Set in this world. And they've got not just one, but sort of 3 or 4 excellent characters. Now, with Fallout, it's very much a parody of the American dream and consumerism and all these great things, but there's so many interesting stories you can tell in that universe. Whereas Halo, for the most part, is about the Master Chief character, right? And he is very much a video game character. He is a guy who wears a helmet the whole time. He has a little bit of personality, he has a little bit of character arc, Clem, but basically he is the unstoppable hero who, shoots first and asks questions later. He doesn't really say very much a lot of the time. So going from, if you're comparing a world like Fallout, which is full of these wacky characters in these extraordinary situations, to, what is basically a way of setting up a gunfight every 30 seconds. Halo is brilliant as a computer game, as a video game, right? To make that loop of, I think even the game designers called it 30 seconds of fun, that they just keep doing endlessly. But you can't tell a story. It's very, very hard without changing it completely to tell a story around it. And in the 2.5 episodes of the TV show I've seen, they kind of try You know, the baddies have a human lady who's their leader for some reason, but it's not very. I'm not gripped. I say?
I think for a tabletop game it can still work, right? Because from what I've seen, at least, it looks like they're really trying. So Mantic is really trying to reproduce this type of video game experience on the tabletop. And so I think the stories you tell is the same as when you play multiplayer video game with your friends, right? Like, there is no narrative. The narrative is we smash them every 5 seconds for 2 hours, and they smashed us every 5 seconds for 2 hours, and it was a lot of fun. And that's about the extent of the story, right? But then you could still have like cool feats of I really surprised them, or I ambushed them, or whatever. So it's not like a story, like a cool narrative that you could tell, but it's still a cool experience. I agree. I would not try to watch a Halo video show. Fallout a lot more, but yeah, for the tabletop, I think it could still work very well. Tom.
I think this is about the way that you experience different mediums. Yeah, I'm going to get a bit like a storyteller on you here, but I think when you play a video game, you remember the things that you do. You're very active, and you remember the thing. You use almost to take the role of the character, especially in an FPS like Halo. So you remember the things that you do, as opposed to if you're watching a film, you're passive. You know, you're basically watching some other character. You're living your life through someone else's eyes, and their decisions matter. Whereas in a video game, it's very active, and I think video games are unique in that way. Whereas if you're on a multiplayer, something like capture the flag, for example, as Clem says, that's basically your story. It's just capturing a flag and bringing it back. And the thing that you remember and enjoy most out of that is the moments within that where, oh, I almost had the flag back to my base, and then someone just murdered me, you know. And I think Mantic, from what I've seen, I've obviously not played it, and I didn't go to Adepticon or anything, but from what I've seen, I think that the Halo game really attempts to reenact that kind of feeling of I'm doing something, and that's the fun of that is what you kind of remember. I think the only thing I would say is that for me, playing tabletop games is more about telling stories than the video games is, and I think that can only go so far. So the Mantic model, the sort of gateway drug, if you like, into the game, is that people will play it for that recreation of those video game moments, but ultimately I think people will want more. They'll want more factions, they'll want more stories to be able to tell, they'll want a bit more depth to it, and that doesn't mean more rules necessarily, it just means a bit more of a narrative hook. And that's my only sort of fear, I think, about the game, is that, I mean, it looks brilliant, and I love Deadzone, I'm a huge Deadzone fan, but my only concern is that it doesn't have that longevity, because it doesn't have that narrative hook that gives that people a really deep experience of, oh, I told these stories, I had my faction, and they were up against it, and you know, that kind of thing. So I'd be really interested to see where the game develops and goes, because I think it will be crucial, and whether it has a sort of longer life.
I mean, as I've already mentioned, I'm not that interested in the Halo universe and the video game experience because I haven't played it, so it doesn't really hit the nostalgia string for me. But I'm still looking forward to it because I think it will bring in new players, and I'm happy to play Deadzone with more people and new people, even if the miniatures are Halo miniatures. You know, like, because there are still cool game mechanics that you get with that game engine. And I think also we probably have to remember this, but getting into tabletop is not an easy thing, right? Like, if you've never touched it, if you've never had miniatures when you were younger, or if you didn't have an uncle that played war games, like that's how I got in as well, right? But it played a big role into how I got into it. Then it's pretty hard to go through the first hear about it, and then buy miniatures, learn the rules, find someone to play with, and so on and so forth. And so for me, Halo, one of those games, like really a gateway into this universe. And if it does just that, and people play a few games of that, and then they turn like, okay, well, it doesn't go that much further, I think mission could still be accomplished for that game if now they know about Mantic and now they know about how much fun it can be to play with plastic toy soldiers and roll dice and so on and so forth. So I agree with you that it might be a bit shallow, but it doesn't have to be deeper than that, right?
Hi, this is Alessio Cavatore, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. So many universes, so little time.
That's a great point, buddy. And there was just one more thing I wanted to throw on that conversation was that I thought so the Mantic Hellboy game was a fantastic cooperative dungeon crawler. And sort of similarly, I think they were really unlucky because they timed it to release with a Hellboy movie. It was the kind of reboot. And it was a massive flop. Came out, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like this. It was an enormous flop. Actually, I quite like it as a film. I mean, I'm a big Hellboy fan, and it's, very. I mean, the comics
You also have terrible taste.
I also have terrible taste.
You love awful things, and so if you like the movie, it's kind of a proof that it deserved a flop.
It has Ian McShane, being Ian McShane. I mean, in fairness to Clem and the point he's just made, I did make you and various other friends watch, John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars on the beamer. Was it the projector? Yes. Oh yeah, I very much enjoy bad action films, particularly. Yes, totally right. I liked the Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd film, for example. Yes, Mark, save
Chris,
me.
There you go, Chris. You know who designed the Hellboy game, right?
Is it
James Hewitt
you mentioned earlier?
James Hewitt.
Fantastic.
We'll talk all about that in a future episode.
Super. Can you remind me to say, oh, James, I very much like the Halo? No, wait.
What's that?
Hellboy.
Yeah. I'm not a Halo guy either. So, but all I can tell you is the Mantic booth was slammed the entire time, and they were demoing 3 different games at the 3 different booths. The other 2 got swept away, and it was all Halo all the time on all 3 booths, running full tilt. You even had Ronnie Renton in person running the games on one table. And there's actually a Halo, I think Spartan Games made it. There's a Spartan Games did a Halo war game. And
they actually did 2, Mark. They did 2. One in Space Battles and one in Clem's favorite scale.
Yes,
pretty much, yes.
15 millimeter, yes. Well, they happen to be right next door to Mantic in the Utopia Ballroom. So Ronnie personally gave them an intro to the Halo game that Mantic was doing and everything else. So it was big. And, the whole goal is to get people to recognize who Mantic Games is. I mean, that tried to happen through, The Walking Dead. And now we've got another big license. And basically, from what I understand, I did not play it. It's Deadzone Light. So
I think it's great. It's not just light, right? They've changed a few things to make the game loop closer to the video game. From what I haven't played it, but I wouldn't call it Deadzone Light. I think it's Deadzone tailored to really recreate the Halo computer video game experience as close as possible on the tabletop. Yeah. And from what I've heard, they really did the brilliant job. Deadzone is a great game to begin with, and they've done also a good job to adjust it.
Why would you change it?
You wouldn't. You'd adapt it. Everybody says it plays like the video game. So, and everybody's really happy. All the miniatures come pre-built, and you're getting Acid House Studio pre-colored terrain in the box. They really made it board gamer simple.
And of course, for Deadzone and of course Halo now, you don't need a tape measure. And if you're talking about brand new people who've never been in the hobby and suddenly you're handing them a tape measure, what do I do with this? Whereas now it's just the beautiful, elegant cube system.
I think the quick change they've made is you respawn guys. You have less fighters, like in Deadzone. Once you kill someone, it's removed and you score VPs. I think in that version, like the Halo version, the fighters respawn.
Just like the video game. Yep.
I was about to say exactly the same thing, Clem. I think that's actually key because if you look at Deadzone, it's a fantastic gateway into wargaming, as I experienced myself, but it's only going to appeal to people like me. Whereas I think the Halo game is going to have broad appeal, and that actually that rule change is quite key, because if you lose a unit in a war game, or if you use your best guy and he take him off the board, it can actually feel quite crushing, if especially if you're playing against a stranger. But if you can then respawn them and then go right back into the fight, I think that's a huge, it's a removal of a huge barrier for a lot of people into wargaming. You've spent all this time painstakingly painting these models, and then they get wiped out in the first turn. It's a horrible feeling, and to take that away, I think, is just wonderful. So really good game design there.
Fantastic. Guys, any final thoughts on Halo before we move on?
No, I think the release is September, right? Last thing.
That's what we heard, yeah.
September, October.
Yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic. Super. And we've got a question on it in the question sections. We've still got, I don't think we've directly touched on the questions, so we've still got some little bit more to talk about. Super. So the Epic Warpath renders for the Nameless and Pledge Manager open soon. That's exciting.
Yes. Yeah, I think they said late April, early May, so that's right around now. And I think they also mentioned they wanted to keep it open for quite a while. So if you haven't pledged for Epic Warpath yet, you'll have time to jump in. And we've seen also new renders for the Nameless, like brand new units. They looked cool. I always have kind of the worry or kind of the question, can I recognize or differentiate, okay, I see this, then I know it's a shooty unit, or it's a melee unit, or it's a very expensive guy, like elite expensive guys or not. So this I couldn't tell so much yet, but the renders look cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of that.
Super, guys. And then Vault stuff, we've got specific Deadzone teams, which is a super cool idea. We've got a banner, a hero, a musician for Kings of War.
Chris, you haven't looked at it, I'm sure. So they, in the latest Vault, they released, I think, for 3 or 4 factions, special bits. So I think for Goblins, maybe for Ratkin, and maybe for Basilians.
And
basically,
halflings,
right?
To Tom's
halflings.
excitement.
Like a banner bearer, a musician, and a hero. Kind of like the old school fantasy stuff. I think it's an interesting move. Obviously, they don't really have rules directly for that. Like it doesn't change anything in particular, but I think it's an interesting thing to make your units look cool. I almost said I'd rather see more basing options, like basing bits that you could 3D print and add to your multi-bases. Because I always find multi-basing a bit intimidating. Like, okay, am I just doing a plain green stuff like grass and I stick my model onto it and it's kind of boring? Or do I try to do something more interesting, but then what do I do, right? That being said, I think you can find those bits in many places, whereas specific goblin, like Mantic Goblin, standard bearer, well, Mantic has to do it. So I'm glad that they do this. But yeah, I still hope at some point they also do some specific basing bits to add to the Vault.
Do we think maybe they're a bit of a victim of their own success, in as much as some previous months have been so absolutely ridiculously good that sometimes when things seem a little bit underwhelming, even though these are useful things to have in your army?
Yeah, so I think one thing to consider is I'm obviously a weird customer in that I play almost all of their games. And so whatever they put in the Vault is interesting for me. You know what I mean? Whereas
we're mega fans, so we can find
I'm right there with
almost
you.
everything.
Yeah,
if you play Armada only, then you're like, I don't care about sci-fi stuff, or I don't care about Kings of War stuff.
Tom, what do you think, buddy?
Well, I was just going to say that, the Vault is something that I've not even touched yet. I don't have a 3D printer. I don't know someone nearby who has a 3D printer. But it's exciting, the possibilities. And actually, these command groups for Kings of War, literally the last game of Kings of War I played, someone said, "Oh, I hate it how you don't have command troops in Kings of War, because it just breaks up that front line of your unit, just aesthetically, And so it's almost like they heard him because the next thing we saw was these command units, and I think just from an aesthetic point of view, they're really nice. But what I really wanted to talk about, because you kind of skimmed over it, was the new Deadzone factions. I didn't play Star Saga, so I don't really have that background, but I'm really intrigued by that because it's almost like an extra layer of narrative. They've got this sort of mercenary troop and the a form of rebellion, like revolutionary types, Arias and Tercia, I think they're called. And I don't, as I say, I didn't play Star Saga, and it didn't really seem to be around by the time I'd kind of got into Mantic games. So I'd really love to hear like more about those and what they are. I checked out the factions on the app, and it seems much more narrative. Like you have these named characters and so on, and they're proper strike teams where everybody's named, and that really interests me.
I think we just need Rob to come back and write another 2,000-word story with precisely these guys, right?
Mark, there you go. I just wanted to mention real quick, if you want a real deep dive into the lore and the stats and everything else on these new strike teams, go check out Coach over at Family Gamers 777. And he is another guest that'll be joining the MUP crew, and we can go over them in a little more detail. But if you can't wait, go ahead and check that out. But he does a real deep dive into it, and you can catch him over there on. He's got a podcast which also shows up on YouTube, so you can check that out.
Yeah, Tom, I think Star Saga, it was a Kickstarter that was. It was a bit before my time, but it came out after Dungeon Saga. I don't think it was as wildly as successful as Mantic would have liked, and it kind of were released with a lot of stuff. You know, if you back for Kickstarter, you got a lot of expansions. But then, of course, the problem with these Kickstarters is that everyone gets so much stuff they never need to buy anything else. So it just sort of that it comes and then it's gone before, and then you forget about it for 2 years, and then this massive box arrives in the post, and you go, oh yeah, I remember I ordered that. And then people, some people start, some people, they're in the middle of doing something else and then not get around to it. But the bits and pieces of the plot we've read, because I'm adamant I want me and Clem to play it because the game looks fantastic and the story looks brilliant as well. It's the first time they introduced the Maison Labs, who are one of my favorite factions in any game system. So it's, Dr. Lucas Coigne is definitely the plucky hero of the story. But you're right, Tom, it looks really, really interesting. And just reading the intros, I still remember whichever hero who has the flamethrower, they make him out to be a really, really bad guy. Like he is absolutely not a hero. And what I particularly found interesting was that the good guys, they're not really sure who's employing them. So it might be they are the plucky heroes, they are the Rebel Alliance, against the corporations. Or it might just be wheels within wheels, and it may be one corporation trying to screw it over another corporation. It may be an executive trying to screw over another executive. So it's incredibly murky, which I find very, very interesting. I find, when we talk about storytelling and, okay, that's a demon, therefore evil. That's a heroic knight, therefore good. So therefore they fight each other. It is the most boring storytelling. I always find if you've got a bad guy who is sympathetic and relatable, that is always the best bad guy, right? Someone who has gone down a dark path and done terrible things, but was very, very, they're not just being a jerk because they're a jerk, right? That's really dull storytelling. Sorry, Tom, I'll pass over to you.
No, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I was getting at. And in fact, last year I got one of these Mantic crazy boxes. I don't know if you guys are able to get those in Europe or not.
Did we ever?
So I got this science fiction crazy box, which was full of Star Saga stuff. And it was a game I hadn't really heard of. And I looked it up and I thought, God, I can't find this. And luckily at the time I was playing a game that Modiphius do called 5 Parsecs from Home, which is a solo war game. It's a story narrative-driven war game. So I was able to use a lot of the Star Saga stuff for that. It's a different episode every time
Tom, sorry to interrupt you, buddy. I bought the rules for it a while ago, and that was always an idea of mine, was to use that rule set to play within the the Warpath universe.
Yeah, well, I would absolutely recommend it. And I mean, it's more or less what I did, but although I didn't know that much about the Warpath universe at that point, so it's really a homebrew setting. But most of my figures that I were using were Mantic ones, and it's a fantastic game. Like I really it doesn't cost you very much, and if you've got a lot of Deadzone stuff like your terrain, your mat, you can use all of that. You can use pretty much all your Deadzone factions, because I did.
If you play Deadzone, you've got everything you need to play.
Yeah, pretty much. Although the one thing I would say is you have to create a crew. So you kind of want to make. Some of my crew were Rebs figures, and some of them were Stargrave, plastic kits that I just put together, kind of thing. And you do want to kit bash a bit. It's a very good hobby in game, but it's also completely narrative. Like you're just rolling random dice rolls and finding out who you're going to fight, and you have to try and make sense of it. So I thoroughly recommend it. I certainly recommended it to Walt as well. But it's just that I never got to play Star Saga, so it was kind of my next best option.
Us neither. I mean, I have it. I did not get it through Kickstarter because I don't think I was already playing back then. But I found a used copy, and so it's not painted yet. I think I primed the models. I haven't painted them yet, and I want to do obviously my Mason Labs with the content of the box, because that's how, as Chris mentioned, that's how we got Mason Labs into Deadzone and Firefight. It's thanks to Star Saga. But yeah, it's definitely on the menu at some point, so we need to give it a try.
Nameless too, I think, buddy, actually. Yeah, I think for a long time it was the only way you could get the Nameless as well.
I think you're right. Like there was an expansion of the
exactly.
Star Saga. Now you can get them on the Vault, another plus for the Vault, right? But yeah.
Super. Okay, guys. So perhaps we can move on.
Move on to maybe kind of on topic. Dungeon Saga Origins is coming to retail, I think, basically in May. So we've already got our Kickstarter copy. Chris and I. Tom, did you also get it from Kickstarter, the Dungeon Saga Origins?
I didn't buy it, no, but my friend that I've been playing Kings of War with did, and I've had a few goes of Dungeon Saga already. He had the Kickstarter, so he's not painted up all the figures, bless him, but that's because you get a lot with the Kickstarter, don't you? So when I saw the retail box, I thought, oh, it's a bit there's not much to it, because I'm used to playing with the huge set, which is fantastic. Again, it's a very sort of accessible game, isn't it? And it's certainly one that you could play with your kids and stuff. It's great. And what I was surprised by is the way that the maps, there's only 3 things, but they're 2-sided. So there's a lot of different maps that you can set up just from those 3 boards, which I thought that surprised me, pleasantly surprised me. I thought it was really cool.
I think the same with Hellboy as well. Yeah, you think, oh, there's only so much variation you can get out of it, but it is surprising how much you can get out of that seemingly limited amount.
I would just say one thing for the DSO retail launch. I was hoping for a slightly more accessible price point, because I think it's at €70 now for the core box.
I agree with you, Clem.
I think so.
I was hoping they
70.
put it out at 40 to 50. Yeah.
I think $49.90 would have been. There's a kind of a psychological barrier, like below 50 or above 50, and I was hoping for keeping it below 50. So, which is kind of the case if you have the retailer percentage and so on. You're getting very close to this. So maybe announcing it at release at 70 means they can lower the price somehow a bit more. But for me, for this game to be very successful, it needs to be in as many hands as possible. And I think it's great value for the game it is, right? But the real question to me is, if it sits on the shelves in a board game store, will someone that has never touched a miniature jump in? Because that's the main question, right? Like, that's the main goal for this game. Well, the other goal is, if you have kids, play a tabletop game with your kids. They may be a bit too young to play Kings of War, well, that's not an issue. You can play Dungeon Saga Origins, or you don't have time to play a full Kings of War game with your kids. Well, you can slap it.
But of course, Glenn, that's a much smaller group of people than the first group you mentioned, right? They're surely the people they're going after. And if you were put off by the price of the Kickstarter, because you say, well, that's a bit much, times are tough. Are you really going to go, £70? Okay, brilliant. I'll go for that. That's not a spontaneous purchase, £70. That's something you've got to think about. And as you say, Clem, you're not going to necessarily attract brand new people. Whereas if it was 40 quid and it comes with a lot less stuff in the box, it's more like more like a taste. I think then you're attracting new people. Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Clem, really. I think that they've got to play it very carefully because it's a very crowded space, the dungeon crawl board game. It's not like Halo where there's not really anything else like that. This is a well-trod path for board games, and also board games that are aimed at that kind of broader market. They are actually, a lot of them are really expensive. So maybe they thought that they could sort of like price it just a little under and see if that would work. So I guess time will tell whether that works or not. I think for me personally, I was thinking I'm going to pick this up when it comes to retail. And now I'm thinking I still want to get it, but it's maybe fallen down my priority list a little bit just because of the price. I think there's a few things that I would like to get first, I think.
I think from my perspective is I feel more like in the uncle situation now. Like, how do I get my nieces and nephews into tabletop gaming? And not just my actual nieces and nephews, but like the broader speaking. And in that case, it feels like a €50 game can get for like a birthday gift or like under a Christmas tree works. 70, it's not that big of an increase, but psychologically speaking, it's already kind of a bit more. Maybe I'm wrong, and like video games are just already €70 anyway, so it's just actually a good price. But
they are. But also, Clem, actually having so much stuff in the box, because I think for £70, still good value, but actually for the customer we're talking about, actually you don't want a box crammed full of stuff, right? That's too much. It's too intimidating. It's not, you're not going to go, okay, I'm going to paint this entire board game or whatever. You're going to want, I remember when The Walking Dead came out, the starter box for that was 4 characters and some zombies.
Yeah, I think
that's smarter, some cardboard terrain, etc. It was really, if you paint 10 models, you're playing this game.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. So don't get me wrong, I love Dungeon Saga Origins. I think they really nailed it with it. Like, I love the quality of the gaming pieces. The rules are great. It was good fun to play it. But I have to say, I really like also the Games Workshop small games. I don't know how they call it, but like you can buy at Barnes and Nobles.
Blitzball. We talked about this before, right?
Yeah, so Blitzball, and they've made some others. They're now doing a Dark Tide box game similar to this. And the idea is they put like 2 plastic frames, some cardboard tokens, a handful of D6s in the box, and they sell those for, again, under €50. And I think Mantic really is in position to do this, especially now that they get more and more very cool plastic sprues. And I think one of the next thing they should do is, again, an entry-level, very simple game where it's basically the price of an ambush box plus, right? Like, it's about this amount of stuff in the box, maybe even less. Like, you really don't need too many miniatures.
No, Clem, I'd say a lot less. I'd say a lot less.
Like 1 or 2 sprues of a faction and 1 sprues of another, like the good guys and the bad guys or whatever, and some cardboard and a simple board game mechanic around it. Sell it for less than 50, and this is the thing you buy to a friend that is maybe you think might be interested in tabletop games, but you're not yet certain, and that's what you get them. The Deadzone starter set is also obviously a no-brainer. It's a slightly different price. That's the only difference.
The beauty with the Halo game coming out now is that a lot of people won't even realize they're playing a tabletop game. They'll think, I'm playing a board game. Sits in that space. You don't have to build the models, etc., etc. And they come on They come on different color plastic, so you'll have a blue team and a red team. You don't have to paint the models, so you'll have a load of people who may not even realise there's this whole hobby iceberg sitting under their feet, but it's there as and when they want it. And for those that do, and for those that don't, they're still getting a lot of fun out of the product. Super.
Sounds good.
Yeah, really good, guys. Okay, that's probably enough talking about Halo for now. Let's move on to our Warpath. Firefight. Clem, you've got stuff to say.
A lot of it, actually. So the first one, let me brag a little bit, because I have the privilege and luck of being in the playtesting group. I think it's been showing in the previous episodes how excited I was for Epic Warpath. And I made it
just a little bit, Clem. Just a little bit,
tiny bit, yeah.
Just small. I know you're undecided about small scale. I think we can all agree, but this you'll make an exception.
So I really needed to see it closer for myself to see if I'm really into it or not. So anyway, I do have the playtesting rules. So now we're already at the second small iteration, because I think there's a few weeks cycle where the studio updates the rules and adds on to the stuff and so on. And I've played 3 or 4 games by now of Epic Warpath with GCPS and Plague and against Vermin and Enforcers so far. And what can I say? It's really a lot of fun. I was initially worried it might be a bit too close to Firefight. Yeah, and actually isn't. Like, it definitely is a different game. No question about it. Like, the way you assign orders to the units, like the way, because they've talked about it in the previews, right, before the Kickstarter campaign actually started. And from having tried that in-game, it does make a big, big difference in how you organize your force and how you actually activate your units, how you move on the table. The fact it's a smaller scale and units don't move that much faster, like infantry will not cross the board. It makes sense, right? So that means you do have to put stuff in transports if you want them to move further than just trying to be outside of the deployment area. I also really like that roads make an impact on the movement of vehicles. So you can actually create very interesting boards. Obviously, for now, we're playing with proxies like empty bases and pieces of cardboard for terrain and so on. So it looks a bit sketchy, but I can already imagine how interesting it's going to be. Mark?
Yeah, what are you using for proxies? Like you said, I'm also in the playtest group. I've been going along a little bit with it. I've only done a game with myself, working around, but boy, I just really want to get something that looks a little better, which is why I'm looking forward to the miniatures, to make it work. But you're right. I mean, it's a different scale, and the scale makes the difference because the tactics are different.
Yeah, I mean, your average shooting range is 12 inches. So on a 6x4, you definitely can't shoot throughout the board. Tom?
I just wanted to ask you, I mean, obviously you'll be perhaps limited in how much you can talk about the game playtesting it and so on. But what interests me is like how differently do the factions play? Like I can see that the big giant monster things, the cool monsters and dropships and everything are very, very different. But my only worry was that the factions would be quite similar once you get down to that scale, and that especially when you're looking at the infantry and the vehicles and so on. So far, I've also played against Marauders because I was very impressed with what they've done with the Marauders entries. Like very, very interesting stuff, and how the profiles are structured and so on. It really felt like factions were different also from the similar mechanic that you get in Firefight, which is the faction orders, right? The faction orders really give some specific flavor to the faction. So, for example, one of the Marauder that I really enjoyed was, I think it's called Quick Thinking. And the way it works is when you activate a unit, you can pay a command point or like a power point, whatever it's called, and you can switch the order that you gave them.
And so, the first phase of the game, you assign an order to the unit. So either you will sprint, or you will advance, or you will do focused fire, like it's called Overwatch, basically. And so first you secretly assign orders to every single one of your units. And then everyone reveals the orders of all of the units. And then you alternate activate each one of these units, right? So first in the movement phase and then in the combat phase. But the thing is, the Marauders, because they're kind of like quick-thinking mercenaries, one of the special actions they can do, so the special order they can do is when you activate a unit, you can switch it. And so you've set them for a sprint, and then you realize, it would be so much better if they could actually shoot in priority shooting. So you switch it, and then they change what they do. So that's one thing that I saw give a lot of special taste to the factions.
Hey there, I'm Brian.
And I'm Rick.
From Deadzone, the podcast.
And you're listening to Mantic Universe Podcast.
For everything Mantic under the sun.
The other one, the Super Heavies actually were pretty cool. They were not as overpowered as I thought they would be initially. When you look at the profile, like they cost like 300-400 points. Out of 2,000 points, it's like, whoa, that's going to be a lot. And they have a very high armor, lots of health points and so on. But actually, no, they do, like, you can kill them. They do have special abilities and special rules and special stuff that give different taste to each faction. But no, that was pretty cool. So I'm not at all worried about this. Also, there are quite a bunch of entries in the army lists. If you look at the Kickstarter already, you see for each faction what infantry and vehicles and bikes and flyers and tanks and so on you get for each faction. That's a lot of stuff. Like, there's more entries than in Firefight, I think. So, yeah, pretty cool. Chris?
Yeah, buddy, I've got to be honest, I'm very excited about this now you started talking about it. I love the idea of giving orders to things and then watching it playing out. I love that kind of secret information. One thing, Tom, that I'm really, really excited about from a narrative point of view, it's a simple one, but it's classic, is I know Clem will get a ton of GCPS and he'll get a ton of plague. So we'll have a table where there's a plague outbreak and yes, and I always really enjoy that. And from my perspective, what I'll probably do is I'll definitely do a Forge Fathers army because I love the Forge Fathers, and I'll do this is a specific Forge Star, and we're going around with specific orders to it's already the Forge Star I have for my Firefight and Deadzone plots, right? It's going to be the same guys, so the story is going to go on and on. Sorry, Tom, go for it.
No, I was going to say that sounds really cool. And I really like the idea of you sort of assigning all the orders and then playing them out turn by turn. So you've almost got the Kings of War, you're deciding what your whole army does, but then you're actually doing it in a more Deadzone Firefight way, which sounds really cool. It's like the best of both worlds. I also am very excited about the secret orders kind of thing, because I think that will build up a nice tension when you sort of see your opponent reveal their hand kind of thing. It's very
there's
cool.
Going to be an element of bluff to it, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's going to be sort of like, but he knows that I know that he knows that I know. You're going to get
and then I can see how that would be really exciting to play. I must admit, just when you were talking about the plague there, the moment that I got interested in this game is when I saw that horrible big plague monster, and I just imagined that crashing into buildings. I thought that for me looks really cool.
I can tell you something else is obviously I don't have the model for it, but the base is 80 millimeters in diameter compared to 30 millimeters for 4 infantry guys. It will be a massive guy, like a big monster. I think that would be pretty cool. For me, the other big element for the narrative is with a smaller scale on a 6x4, you have a lot more real estate, and so you can build a lot more interesting maps because you will play something a lot more interesting than like Epic Dwarf map, which is great for the balanced tournaments style thing. But when you have a smaller scale on a 6x4, you can really create a settlement, or like this is a secret Mason lab research facility and things went wrong and it's overrun by plague and enforcers are coming in and trying to, murder the bigger monster before it rampages through the rest of the planet or whatever. And so I think through the terrain building, you can create very, very interesting stories, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
I'm excited, Clem.
Cool.
Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the first thing for Warpath and Firefight. The second one is I was borderline late today for recording. Well, actually kind of late for recording. No way around it, right? Because I just did a quick gaming day today for Firefight. So the excuse for it was our friend Marcus was visiting town. And he asked, hey, can we play some Firefight? And so we brought in a few players. And so we had 3 tables going, 6x4 with 1,000 points of Enforcers against Forge Fathers. I didn't watch that one. They were playing in the background. And on my side, I did actually 2 demo games in parallel. So we had 2 4x4s with 500 points armies. So I built 2 GCPS lists and 2 plague lists. And I introduced 3 new players to the game, basically. One who was already sold, and it's just a question of, hey, I need to play and learn the rules and so on. One other player is already a Deadzone player and was kind of already thinking, yeah, that sounds interesting. Doesn't look like it's too much more on top of my Deadzone strike team. And also I wanted to buy that model, so that would also work. So, was kind of on the fence. And the other one basically similar, like they already had bought half of a Firefight starter of Viamin, but also wanted to see more of the game, to decide, okay, how excited am I about the game? How much do I like it? Do I want to actually spend the energy to assemble and build them? And I think everyone had a great time. We'll see over the next few months who actually assembles their armies and comes to the next gaming days. But I had a lot of fun. Like both demo games went very smoothly, very nicely. I had forgotten a bunch of rules, because they've changed stuff with the command protocol. So a few times I said, well, I don't remember, I'm not sure. Like, don't quote me on this. Let's just decide it's this way and let's move forward. And I think it actually works fine. And then the other table were also looking on their own at rules, and then they corrected me on a few things, which is also pretty cool, And ultimately, what everyone agreed saying was, it's still a Mantic game, right? Like, sure, it's the first time ever that you play. You'll have a few questions and maybe open the book and check a few things, but you can already tell that by game 3 you will not need the book. And I think that's really the strength of the game, and people really already could see that. And also the fact that you use the leader model and makes everything very quick, very, very efficient. Yeah, a very good time.
It's a great game, though, isn't it, Clem? It really is.
Absolutely is. I mean, especially, we've said that already a few times, but I really think with the command protocol, they've done a brilliant job in, smoothing the few edges that were a bit rough here and there. It's just I can't get enough of that game. That's basically how I feel about it right now. So, yeah, no, absolutely.
It's really exciting, buddy. Fantastic.
I guess we can switch to Deadzones, right? Or did you guys play any Firefight? Or Mark, how did you feel with your playing with yourself? And I mean with Epic Warpath.
I think we talked about that one already. Yeah, as we mentioned before, the tactics are different, and it's just a bigger thing. You're in a closer game. You're wondering why would anybody go in an APC, because it just gets blown up and everybody dies. But as you mentioned before, there's a reason that APCs exist. So just to get them up there and laying out the landscape differently, and it's just a different scale. It's just a totally different way to think. And as far as Firefight goes, I am really looking forward to Origins coming up next month, and signed up for my Firefight game, so I'll be working with that. I think Keith Ambrose is running that, so I'll get in some Firefight next month. I didn't play at Adepticon just because it was just a tournament. So, but
Are you going to take your Forge Fathers, Mark?
They just got one origin. So what's that?
Are you going to take your Forge Fathers?
I don't have to bring anything. They provide the armies. So it's kind of like a demo, like how to, learn to play kind of thing.
Oh,
so I just roll up
fantastic.
and they've got some armies already there, and you just pick which one you want to play, and you get in a game of Firefight. And I love it. So I'd love to see them do that. I'd love to see them do that at Adepticon. So. But, they're going to be doing that for all the factions. So, actually, as we roll into Deadzone, I can start off with that. I'm signed up for Deadzone, and one of the Deadzone sessions is already sold out, which is a great sign. So,
that's pretty cool. Have you played any Deadzone, Chris?
Sadly not, buddy. The only sci-fi I've been doing is Antares.
Yeah. What about you, Tom?
I haven't played any Deadzone for a while, but I know that I probably should have mentioned this in the news section, but there was some chat about the Night Stalkers coming to Deadzone this month, which there's been a radio silence on that. It wasn't on their monthly update, was there, for Mantic, the monthly update. So I'm kind of curious. I'm quite excited to see where they go with that, and obviously it feeds into that GCPS as Aliens Marines and the kind of Aliens echoes that come across in that. So yeah, I've been looking forward to that. We have this big convention in Scotland, Tabletop Scotland it's called, and I foolishly one night signed up to run a Deadzone event for this, and then realized in the cold light of day that there's no way I could possibly do that. I don't have enough copies of the game or anything, so I kind of retracted that. I just really wanted to play Deadzone, basically. I wanted to spread the word, and I guess, maybe not this year, but maybe next year. It's certainly something I would quite like to do, because I think it's one of those games, as I said before, that it's such a hook into wargaming, and it certainly worked for me. So I kind of feel like, I want to spread the word a bit. I think there must be people playing it. I've seen plenty of copies being sold in Scotland and so on, but there's an enormous amount of players out there at the moment. So I'd like to change that if I could.
They're just hiding in the basement.
Right, exactly.
Mark.
I was just going to mention, Tom, I'll hook you up with Mike Carter. He can give you some tips and things like that on how to run a game for like 4 people, where you just kind of, you're the moderator and things like that. So
in my head, I thought, I could just get a little corner at the corner of this big tabletop event, and just teach people Deadzone. I thought that sounds great fun. I've got 4 factions. I've got 5 factions, in fact, ready to go. I've got lists for them all and everything, so I could introduce people to the game. And in my head, that was going to be a lovely little event, And then, of course, the organizers got back to me and said, you will have probably about 20 or 30 kids wanting to play all at once, and I thought, actually, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
You need to find someone, because being on your own with that many people is a bit harder. So you should find maybe 1 or 2 more players that also know the game, and you can also, if one wants to go to the bathroom at some point, then the other 2 are there and can keep things going, and you just merge your terrain collection and your strike teams collection, and then you can have 2, 3, 4 tables going in parallel.
That's exactly,
and it's very easy to jump in and jump out. So I think that would, and I agree, Deadzone is perfect, because you can almost get anyone passing by and throw them into it and just teach them along how the game works. So I think that
and you can learn as you play. You don't need to learn, you don't need to, okay, let me tell you the rules and then we'll start, right? Deadzone, you can just do it very, very intuitively, and the game is so intuitive. I think, sorry, Tom, I think Clem's hit the nail on the head there by saying, if you can get someone else local who has the same passion as you to be your wingman, it makes a huge difference whether you've got 20 screaming kids or just a couple of people walking by. It's always a big help if there's 2 of you there, to be quite honest. It feels a lot less awkward if you're not there by yourself, and it just shows it's not just one person who's interested in this. There is a small group. It may be a small group, but there is a starting point, and more people are going to be interested in getting into the game if they see there's a couple of people. It's a lot better than one.
I mean, just to finish that story, though, I thought discretion was the better part of valor. They were quite keen for me to run a tournament, actually, and I was like, there's no way I'm at that level. But what happened on the back of that is that Mantic are coming to Tabletop Scotland in September, so they will be running, as far as I'm aware, they will be running the Halo game there. So people will be able to come along and play Halo, and I mean, that's a fantastic outcome for everyone, because I think there will be a lot of people in Scotland who take a look at Halo and think, yeah, I want some of that. So it's a happy ending anyway, just in case you thought I'd let everyone down.
Not at all, Tom. And also the other thing I'd say, I mean, it's about you as much as it is anyone else, right? There's no point biting off more than you feel you can comfortably chew. And the other thing I'd just say is, if Mantic are coming, just ping them an email, make yourself available if you'd like to. You know, like, hey, I'm relatively new, but I'm really passionate. Can I come along and help? And I'm sure they, you know, it's always good to have passionate people, right?
Yeah, see if they're running demos at the booth.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, but that's a good idea, guys.
Yeah, like please pay me lunch, bring me a free T-shirt and my ticket to the venue, and maybe I'll come and help you play a few games. No, I'm joking, obviously.
With my local accent, I understand
right.
The locals, you know.
Yeah,
right. I can give you the jungle guide experience, you know.
Exactly.
Right.
That guy comes from Paisley, you know, whatever it might be.
Yeah, the thickest accents I'll be able to decipher for Ronnie, perhaps.
Exactly. You know, there's what do a load of guys from Nottingham know about Scotland? Come on, you know, they need the help.
Quite right.
Cool. Yeah. Deadzone. Well, guess what about my terrain? It's still unpainted.
Perfectly painted. Oh, what a shot, Clem.
No, but I made progress on it.
Oh, interesting. You've said that a few times over the 2 years we've been
I'm making slow progress.
And yet it never gets finished.
What can I say? So I had asked, a local player who made his terrain look really nice, and said, it's just, throw white and dry brush and wash it and so on. And I tried that and just felt like it didn't look so great. I said, no, just use that wash instead. And so now I bought the wash that he actually told me, like the good old, the wood, how is it called? The dark tone from RP Painter, like the stuff.
Yeah, dark tone or strong tone. Yeah. The dip stuff.
Good old stuff, right? And he said, no, just use that.
That stuff is great. It is so good, though. Sorry, Tom,
and so that's what I bought. I said, oh, yeah, I remember that stuff existed, and I need to have the proper thinner and blah, blah, blah. But I think it will work awesome for my terrain.
Hey,
so
there we go. I'm so optimistic for the next 2 years, Clem. But hey, I've got to be completely honest. I've been going on a kick in like repainting stuff and just making things look a bit nicer. At some point, my sci-fi terrain will have to be repainted. It's going to happen. Tom.
Yeah, on a similar note, the Deadzone terrain was actually the first thing I painted after my 30-year hiatus of not painting anything. And I went for a really sort of cyberpunk Shadowrun style, neo-drenched. So I painted
it all... It sounds ambitious.
It's all undercoat of blue and then dry brushing sort of neon purple on top of that. And then really getting lots of oil wash and rust and so on, staining it so it looks really, really grimy. And I was really pleased with it at the time. And I have to say, a year later, I'm looking at it going, oh, God, that just looks really messy. But I think I love the idea of that. And I think the Deadzone terrain lends itself really well to that sort of theme. And I probably should go back and do a little bit of detail on it.
I mean, it's terrain, right? Like, it has to be in the background. If your terrain is better painted than the miniatures that go on top of it, something went wrong, right? Like you don't want the terrain from overpowering the miniatures. You
don't want it to draw your eye. You want it to be a cool playground for your models to go into, right? But you want your eye to be drawn to the models. But you do want it to look all cool and as if this is a place, right? Not just random stuff thrown together, right? It's got to look. Yeah, this was 30 minutes ago, 2 weeks ago. This was a nice place to live. It's just recently house prices have gone to hell.
Yep, something like that.
But that's why Deadzone is just so cool for, being a hobbyist, right? You can do, as Tom mentioned, you can do cyberpunk cities, you can do industrial wastelands. I noticed actually Corvus Terrain have started offering STLs for rocks, which, that I didn't make that sound super exciting, but they fit perfectly to Deadzone, so they're all the right shapes. And I'm definitely going to, and it's very reasonable. I think it was like £8 or €8 or something for the set. So I haven't got them yet because I've got a ton of stuff in the 3D printing queue. But when I do, I'm going to have to get them. And then I suppose I'm going to have to get myself a new mat because that's going to look weird with the cyberpunk Mantic ones I have.
I think that's
virtually identical designs.
I could see a group order coming up, Chris. For,
quite possibly.
I'd take a couple of deserts, because I don't think Mantic does any desert themed. There used to be one for the
second edition, I think it was. I've tried,
like one of the
extension or something. I've really tried many a time to, I think I've even got like an eBay search for the keyword or something. It's never come up for that. I would like that mat. I mean, it's an okay map, but you're right, Clem. Maybe we can place an order with a custom deep cut. Or something.
Like the guys from Regensburg, they also had a bunch of custom mats, and I think they said they got them printed by, I can't remember which company it is now, but any one of those mat manufacturers anyway.
Big boys. Yeah,
they can do it, and so I'm sure if we say, hey, can you put this desert or like Badlands type of terrain. And then we can put some of the 3D printed stones and some cacti and some oil rig, whatever platform, like industrial platform or something like this. And boom, you have a Deadzone different environment.
I'd love us if you remember, Clem, with those guys, we had the Deadzone Gaming Day where you wrote the story. I'd love it if we had a bit more varied. I mean, if you'd have known at the outset they had these incredible tables, it would really help the story. Because of course we can say, okay, we're in the Badlands outside the city, and that's what's going on at this table, whereas this table is the town centre, and stuff's gone bad, and they can all be linked.
It really goes hand in hand, right? Like if you have an idea of the stories you want to tell, then you will design the terrain pieces you want to use. And then once you've created the terrain pieces, when you go back to, okay, now I will flesh out the story, the way you've built the terrain pieces will also enrich the way you write the stories and the scenarios. So I think it is really a positive loop, a reinforcement loop of I'm creating better terrain. And by better, I'm not saying just it's better quality or whatever, but it's more intentionally designed, like this is an actual place, and it's not just an epic dwarf map where I just throw random stuff on the table.
It's a better experience. I feel actually, Clem, I think this is in the 2 years we've been making the pod, this is one of the biggest improvements we've made, is that you're right, my experience of playing is much more sort of enriched, I suppose. And as you say, all these things we've been thinking about little things more, like, I remember us talking about, I'm really fed up with playing a game of Kings of War on such a generic fantasy table. And maybe they have a snowy wood, maybe it's a grassy mat, maybe there's a, lava hill or something, whatever. But like, this just looks like a load of random stuff people have thrown on the table, because that's exactly what it was. But we think a lot more now about, okay, we're in the Northern Alliance. Where are we fighting, and why are we fighting? And then, as you say, then that leads into, well, okay, let's make a story out of this. So what's going on? And and things like 3D printing just make it the opportunities way more. Fantastic, super, guys. Anything else to mention on Deadzone?
Absolutely, because I got to mention, if you're going to be shopping at Corvus Terrain, to use your MUP discount code.
See, Tom, this is what happens, right? So we get to, we're planning the episode and we say, right, have any of us played any Deadzone this month? No. Okay. Probably we won't take 20 minutes talking about that then, but, it happens,
And speaking of Corvus Terrain, has anybody seen what John Fawkes has been doing in Deadzone Fanatics with his lava table and all the Corvus Terrain and stuff that he built?
Really
looks
cool.
Amazing.
It looks
fantastic.
Fantastic. And they actually had the video of Dreadpath Zone as well. They had one where the floor was it wasn't lava, but it was like a sea, and they had Nameless coming out of it and stuff, and it was just really cool. Some of the maps that people have created are just eye-wateringly good, and I just want to play on all of them.
I think that's something that should be put forward more. Like, please showcase your table. Like, you've built a really cool table, or you came up with a cool story or cool layout. Please post about it and tell us all about it and tell us the stories, because I feel like it really it makes everyone smarter and better about playing their own games. When you see, oh, I didn't think of that one, or that's interesting, but I would do it slightly differently. Well, go ahead then. But at least you've had the seed idea for it. And so I think that's something we should be sharing more.
A bit like Kings of War multibasing, I feel like we're not quite taking full advantage of this. I think you're absolutely right, Clem. Yeah, because if you see something, you might not go, I want to copy that. You might go, well, that's an interesting idea, and I'd like to, it inspires your creativity. So, yes, yeah, very much so. Sorry, guys, I feel like I'm just repeating what everyone else has said, so I'm getting a little bit tired. Sorry, dear listener. Super, good. So Deadzone, very good game. Please play it, dear listener. Super, so should we move on to our Pannilore Kings of War, guys? Kings of War. Probably very little to say on this.
Let's do it.
Nothing.
So, Chris, you've played some games, right?
Yes.
Now that you have a huge gaming group locally, that you don't have enough time to play all of the opponents that you have available, like rich people, rich man issues.
It's first world problems. Absolutely, Clem. No, it's yes, as we've said previously on the pod, it's going great. We tend to either have a night where I invite as many people as possible, advertise it on the Discord. Hey, there's a couple of us and we're going to be playing Kings of War. In which case we might play Ambush and try with the purpose of trying to get new people playing, right? But they'd have a good time. I've got to be honest, most of the time we do that, I don't actually play the game because I'm just in salesman mode, right? And I'm coaching the game or just chatting to people, etc. Right? But I do actually
it's a
enjoy
different
that.
Experience.
Totally
it's
different
nice,
experience.
But it's a different experience.
But I do very much enjoy that. I don't want to do it every time, if I'm completely honest. But generally speaking, I end up going into sales mode anyway, right? But for example, Thursday, it was just me and Andrew. So we went to, I did invite other people, but everyone was busy. So it was just the two of us. So we went to Quest Hub and played 1,500 points. His Night Stalkers against my Northern Alliance. And this was sort of, I think very much proto list for what I want to take to Clash of Kings. It's, fewer points, but it's that basic idea, right, Clem? And it was very enjoyable. We just played Invade, kept it simple. And we had two, I think, very well matched armies, in as much as both armies are quite slow. Basically, two slow combat armies. I've got some shooting, but it doesn't work particularly good against Night Stalkers. Obviously, I know that, and I'm not going to start taking things out of my list because I know I'm playing Night Stalkers. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that's a slippery slope, so I'm not doing that.
Yeah, you're tailoring your list for your opponent.
Exactly.
Is kind of a thing to do.
Yeah, it's like when I used to play Trident Realm, and every time, oh, look, they've got the Fire Oil. What a surprise. Exactly right. So, but yeah, no, we had a lovely old time. Andrew's, he's getting, he's a smart chap, but he's getting a lot better at the game. It's fair to say. He took the first turn and moved over the centre line, so playing Invade. So I had to do something to obviously win the game, right? I had to sort of break through. And it's interesting playing with a sort of mostly Speed 5 army because it's a lot less forgiving. If you play with fast stuff, you can make mistakes, whereas if you play with Speed 5, it is more challenging. But I found it a lot of fun, and for most of the game, I was losing. In the whole game, I think I only lost a regiment of ice elementals, but in terms of obviously playing the objectives. And I thought Andrew, he threw out his Mind Screech and threw stuff into the breach to kind of slow me down, which I thought was absolutely the right decision to make. And I thought he'd done everything right and was going to just see out the game. But I managed to get a regiment, my only regiment of Snow Foxes at speed 8 with Pathfinder. They just went running around the back. The whole game, they were just running around the board, staying out of things' arcs, And then I think it was turn 4 or turn 5. I think it was even turn 5. they went into the rear of a legion of bloodworms, the famous bloodworms, doing 30 attacks. And I've put the hammer of measured force on my ice elementals, which everyone says is a good idea. So I gave that a try. It does make a big difference. So yeah, I had 55 attacks into the bloodworms who were already damaged. So they exploded into, chunky viscera. And once that happened, the Night Stalkers sort of, they evaporated or whatever. They went back to the nightmare realm. But it was a very, very good game. I very much enjoyed it. But it was, to be honest, it was just nice to rock up and play a game of Kings of War.
It's always a good time, no?
Always a good time. Yeah.
This is Fred reminding you to visit the Kings of War forum, KOWforum.com. No ads, no commercials. That's KOWforum.com.
So, a lot of fun. Tuesday this week we go back, but we're playing Antares, and Andrew's very, very sensibly suggested, agreed to a demo game of Antares. So we'll be joining with Caleb and playing Antares next week. So won't get any more Kings of War on, but I've been working on, carried on working on my Northern Alliance. I just had an hour today. That's the only time I could have this weekend, but managed to do a load of work on some more bases, multi-bases for my Northern Alliance army. So we're getting there. So I've changed my list a ton of times. I'm going mostly infantry because my idea for my army is that we're going to call the army the Wolves of Blackridge. And it's the idea that they were the garrison. So Blackridge was the settlement that was destroyed by the Greenskins. And the story for my army is they were the garrison, but they were tricked by some goblins. So some goblins sent a raven saying, hey, we're such and such settlement. We're under attack. The goblin army is here, or Greenskin, whatever. So, we went, oh, God, right, we've got to come on, everyone. No time to wipe your feet, got to go out. But it was a trick. So they were, they sort of humped up into the mountains to walk along the ridge. And they sort of, saw in the distance the city on fire and, they weren't there to defend it. So we're going on this sort of saga to regain our honour. So the Thane who was in charge, he's not in charge anymore, but he's sort of nobly stepped aside and an Ice Queen is now in charge. And so we're going on the quest to Clash of Kings. And Walt's written the lore for us. So we are trying to fuck Clem. So our quest is, do you remember us talking about the name for the Northern Alliance capital, Chill, and going, it's a bit rubbish as a name? We all kind of agree it's a bit embarrassing. No disrespect to anyone listening who may or may not have come up with it.
I mean, come up with a better one, and then retcons don't upset anyone in the Mantic universe anyway, right?
So what we're questing for, so our team, right, is that we're all playing Northern Alliance, and we're on a saga to reclaim the true magical name of the city, like the true name. It's on a scroll that's out there, Clem, and we have to regain it.
The truth is out there. You just need to
exactly
get a wooden spoon and start digging to find the.
So it's up to one of us to find the real true name of Chill. And then at one point I'll try and explain this to Mantic and go, can we rename Chill? Why? Because we had a magic scroll. Yeah,
we found it. We got the wooden spoon and we found it.
We'll be lucky to get
really cool.
Spoon. Yeah, but yes, we just had a ton of fun with it, right? So I got some Mantic dwarves, so I've been building them. So they're going to be, obviously. So what I've done is I've done some very, very simple conversions, putting like Northern Alliance clansman arms and stuff like that to try and make them look a little bit. I might do some green stuffy kind of cloaky type stuff if I feel particularly spicy. But yeah, I mean the Mantic dwarves, I can't remember which ones I got now. It's the guys with the hammers and the shields. To be honest, all the dwarf units all sound the same to me. Not shield breakers. Anyway, whatever they are.
Shield breakers, they're iron something.
Yeah,
whatever.
All sounds the same.
Dwarves.
Dwarves. I mean, they're very, very old sculpts. I mean, they're quite cartoony, which kind of I feel like they get away with it better than they should. And I think we've seen in Kings of War Fanatics recently a couple of really amazing painters making those models look amazing. So I won't make them look that good, but I think they will look decent. When I'll do non-metallic metals and all the rest of it, and they will look totally fine. So yeah,
so they do the job quite well. Like it's a special aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? So if you are looking for old hammer dwarf aesthetic, well, that's not it. That's something else. So obviously, if what you wanted is old hammer style dwarfs, then get the old hammer dwarfs, not the Mantic ones. But as dwarfs, they're pretty good models, I think.
Yeah, and they're very similar, to be honest, to the Forge Fathers. I really like, but just because they're old, doesn't necessarily mean they're bad.
Yeah, I tried to convince myself of that now that I turned 40, but Cool.
But
that sounds
fair, we were bad when we were young, though. So
yeah, I didn't wait that long to actually suck. Yeah, that's true. Did you ever play 2300 points with your list, Chris, or not yet? Or are you waiting for Nottingham for that?
No. So bless Andrew. I mean, he mentioned it last time, and he was like, "Chris, why are we only playing 1,500 points then? If you're building up to this 2,000?" It's like, well, it's giving you a chance to paint stuff, buddy. But no, he's bless him. So so I've got two regiments of dwarves to paint, and I'm going to do another horde of human clansmen, Clem. Just casually. Why not?
Not at all trying to optimize your list after having listened to Tom on the counter charge or Northern Alliance with you. So, firstly, I'm playing very narrative, blah blah blah. Okay, Tom, what do I put in my army? Okay, this, yeah.
Okay, my list going in the bin, right? What units am I getting? But I tell you what, so that was an excellent, dear listener, Countercharge did a brilliant Northern Alliance Army review. But it was so funny because a local chap posted pictures in the WhatsApp chat of what he's working on. It was literally just after it dropped, bing, 3 Snow Troll Primes ready to fight. I'm like, oh, okay.
Someone listens to the podcast. Right. Well, the trick is you have to be Tom to play them the way Tom plays them, right? Like you can have the best list in the world. If you suck, you'll suck. So don't expect too much from it, is what I want to say.
But actually, what's interesting, so I am taking 2 regiments of the dwarves, which I hadn't ever planned on before. But I must have made 30 different lists for the Northern Alliance. And the difficulty I have is that everything is so expensive. I can't quite get, because what I'm trying to do is kind of build an engine, right? Build a machine, right? But every time I built the list, I felt like I didn't quite have, there were a couple of little bit parts I needed that were missing because everything is so darn expensive. Whereas if you add in a couple of cheap unlocks with the Dwarf Clansmen, they perform quite an important role in the list if there's tokens or something, and they'll sit on something. But they mean I can just get a little bit extra, Clem, that suddenly the thing I'm trying to build is actually the thing I'm trying to build.
It makes more space on the rest of the list to let you buy all the toys. I mean, that's potentially a very quite elite army, Northern Alliance, that's for sure. They have really cool entries and so on. But I agree, they're not so easy to write a list for. Also because there are different options, right? It's not like you're stuck in one direction and you want to play this faction. Well, that's how you play them, period. That's not the case. So it leaves a lot of space, especially if you're not trying to be good like you are, Chris.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no. And it's going to be really interesting because it is a slow list. And I'm sure if I play against a good player with a fast list, I have a really hard time because, me, Clem, I'm pretty sloppy with positioning, etc. But we have this unbelievably cool story. And I feel like this is a very good representation of my army. In
itself it will work. I mean, I played undeads with a lot of infantry, pretty slow infantry, actually, hordes of skeletons and, how are they called? Oh, yeah, Soul River infantry. And they're speed 6, so it's not slow, but speed 6, when that's what is supposed to do damage, you absolutely have to plan ahead for the whole game. Where do these guys need to end up? Where do they need to be? Because if you deploy them on the wrong side of the table, they will not reach the other side of the table. And if you start moving in one direction and they need it to end up 12 inches away, that's one full turn of running. And so you really, with a slow army like this, And it's not dwarfs, right? Like where you can just castle up and have people come to you and you still win, surprisingly, like with dwarfs, right? Like Northern Alliance, they are slow, but they still need to go out there. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting play style as well. So sounds cool. Yeah,
I had a lot of fun doing it. Yeah, it was very, very, very rewarding. And actually, for most of the game, I was pretty sure I was about to lose, because, as I said, Andrew played very well, and he was on the objectives, right, and I wasn't, and I had to do something. But it was very, very interesting and fun as a play style. And then the only other thing I'd mention is that next month, it's actually in June. There's going to be an official Kings of War Day in the Quest Hub calendar, which is the first time we've had this. So there will be a Saturday where local guys are available to help me out, and we will just be doing demos and having people play games basically the whole day.
That's really cool. Really cool.
So it's going great. It's at times I do think it's sadly at the expense of Firefight, but the thing is, because things are moving so well for Kings of War, it'd be silly to try and start pushing Firefight at this point, right? It's not the moment to do it.
Focus on one thing, and then I mean, at some point, the group that you have now playing Kings of War with, maybe you'll get slightly bored with Kings of War, like, okay, well, I mean, it was fun, but I would be open to trying something else. And boom, that's when you bring Deadzone to the table.
Or even it's just a different hobby project, right? It's just a different.
Oh yeah,
different
thing. I'm done painting multi-based units. I want to do some sci-fi or whatever, and boom, that's when you bring a Deadzone box or even a small Firefight, because like 500 points of Firefight is pretty simple, right? Like a strike force or half of a 2-player starter set, and you're there. So
and it's a brilliant game at low points.
And
I love
is
Firefights at low points.
Absolutely, no, it really works. But what I was saying is, I completely agree with you. Like now, I think you're on a really amazing dynamic with Kings of War, like with having new players and players that actually are involved and play regularly in the shop, and like show, okay, this game is alive locally. So you should definitely enjoy this and keep going with it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Deadzone can always be what I call a Friday night game for a, if you're going to a grand tournament 2 days, what's the game you're going to play on Friday night? So, when we were down at Lone Wolf, we played Deadzone on Friday night. So
it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because I think for when we go to Clash of Kings in Nottingham, I think my friend Chris and Peter will be bringing their Deadzone stuff, and it wasn't even really a conversation. It was just sort of like everyone just assumed, we'll play Deadzone Friday night. Yeah, absolutely, fantastic, super.
Good.
But lots of Kings of War. Somebody else talk for a bit.
I can take over for a little bit.
There you go. I'll go after you, Clem. So
all right, yeah. So we had a big gaming day in Berlin. It was supposed to be sci-fi, and then things happened, and it turned out to be. So I played only Kings of War. I think some people played sci-fi on the side a little bit. But obviously, like, there were also agenda issues, and so that's why we played Firefight today, not 3 weeks ago, right? But yeah, I played a big Kings of War game, like 3,500 points, because I was challenged by a local player who wanted to put all of their miniatures on the table. And I was like, sure. And so I played my goblins with a regiment of Force of the Abyss, because I wanted to just bring 1,200 points.
I thought you were doing this in small scale, Clem.
No. It was in 28. So we played in 28 mil, 3,500 points on a 6x4. That was completely messy. But we went through the whole game. Actually, it didn't take us that long to play. Because it's still the same game. It's reasonably easy. Like, the rules are, flow quite nicely. It was just a bit more of a mess because you obviously have 2 lines of units. But it was fun. It also felt good to play my Force of the Abyss again, because I hadn't played those miniatures in well over 2 years now, I think. And it was a good occasion to, just have a look again open some old boxes. What do I have in there? And, these ones I want to repaint. These ones I want to improve a little bit. These ones are not finished. I was already starting to think about what's coming with the refresh of the Forces of the Abyss. And The cool thing that happened also for that gaming day was earlier in the morning, there were a couple of people who came to play the old world because like it was a gaming day open for basically anyone. And it was interesting to watch them, set up their game. So it took 45 minutes just to take the miniatures out of the foam and onto the trays. Literally, like 45 minutes. And then playing, it was interesting. Like, I only watched from a distance, so I didn't follow closely. So, looked interesting, but they were obviously also looking at the book quite often. Obviously, it wasn't like they played 10 games of it beforehand, so that's also fair. Like, first games, you always look at the book. And then at the end of the game, again, 45 minutes, putting all the miniatures back in the foam, like off of the tray. So one of the players is already a Kings of War player, so there's no convincing. It was like, yeah, this morning when I came home, when I was preparing to come play, like, why did I select to play the old world? Like, when I was packing my army, I was like, shit, I don't want to do this. Like, why am I doing this to myself, right?
But actually, it puts you in a very healthy position.
Yeah. Yeah, I said nothing, right? Like, I just and actually enjoyed the singing because it was a beautiful Skaven's army. So, you know what I mean? Like, it was a really good cohabitation. Like, they were playing on the side table, one of the tables there, and we just had a good chat. And his opponent is someone who didn't know or hasn't played Kings of War yet, and was, kind of having a look like, oh, and how does it work? Like, how do you remove models? Oh, no, we don't remove models. We do a nerve check. Oh, how does that work? And, and that's the first contact to the game. You say, oh, yeah, maybe I'll give it a try at some point. And again, he already has an army that just needs some maybe different trays that someone could laser cut for him. And that's it. You can try the game. Tom.
Yeah, I was going to chip in there because we've been playing a ton of Kings of War at the local shop. And one of the things, I mean, there's quite a few people there playing other games as well. And one of the things is you don't actually have to entice people over. If you just play Kings of War, you have so much fun that it attracts the attention of other people. Like that's basically what's been happening to us. People go, oh, why are those guys chucking dice around and laughing and having a good time? And it almost sells itself in that way. And I think that's been a real. It's been a real. I just hope I'm kind of at the stage now where, we've got a core group of three of us who've played a fair bit, and then a couple more that are definitely interested and have got armies and so on. And I'm just hoping that we can just spread that a little bit further now. And certainly if there's other people who are interested in Kings of War across sort of East Central Scotland, then you should definitely hook us up and come along to Accent touch. Because I feel like we're just on the cusp of having a little scene,
Tom, how can people get in touch with you if they're listening?
Yeah, well, what I would do is go onto Facebook, probably is the first place, and then look for Accent Games on Facebook. That's the local shop, and you'll see us there. And there's also a Discord group, which is generally where we get together with those things. Sorry, I didn't want to hijack your.
No. That's perfectly on point. No. That's exactly the same thing. Like we've been also saying. Like playing in the shop is very important because it does show there are players for this game, number one, and number two, this game is a lot of fun to play. It looks great on the table, and people are having fun when they play it. Yeah, and that's really a big selling point, I think.
So, Tom, hijacking the conversation is very much MUP style. Boom. Clem, I just hijacked it. Yes, and this was exactly, to Clem's point, this was the mistake I made for years. I was playing in my basement, had everything I need in the basement. It was very handy, very, very practical for me. But no one sees you playing the game. It's just a fun game, and you put it away.
I mean, if someone comes and have a look, you want to punch them in the face, right? Like, what are you doing in my basement?
Intruders, exactly. So yes, exactly right, Tom. And also, try and go a night that's a busy night. If they have, if you go, say for example, they have a Magic the Card Game night. That's probably less useful than if they have a Song of Ice and Fire night or whatever, right? Like, something with a lot of, the sort of Venn diagram that has a lot of crossover. You're far more likely to attract those sorts of people. And as you say, if you're there just having a lovely time, you don't have your head in the book. You'll just laugh. Everyone's having a good time. People are naturally just going to go, hey, I want to have a nice time.
It's partly born out of necessity as well, because when I got into it, I didn't have anyone to play with. I started 2 factions because I thought, if one of my friends wants to play Kings of War, I can play it. But I was too impatient to play it. It was really. I decided to take the plunge only in February there, and I knew that this shop fronted with a lot of Mantic stuff. There was a lot of Kings of War on the shelves. It's one of the first things you see when you go in. And I knew there was probably people that played it there. And then what I found out when I got onto the Discord and started speaking to them was that there is a Pathfinder in Scotland, but he's never come across to this part of the country, even though it's only an hour away on the car. Like he lives where I work, so I'm commuting that distance. But he I think psychologically he didn't want to come over to this part of the country. So you had a shop, a shop that was selling a lot of Kings of War. You had a lot of people who'd bought Kings of War armies, but no one was really playing it. And it was just because no one really wants to make that first plunge, if you know what I mean. And I think often
we know what you mean all too well, sadly.
People who are into this hobby, I think sometimes they're quite shy and they don't necessarily, they're not social butterflies, and that's perfectly fine. They've found a hobby that they love, and it doesn't. They have people who share that interest and so on. So making the first sort of step is actually a bit of a challenge. And so I just kind of said, look, we don't have a Pathfinder. I don't know how to play this either, but who wants to learn with me? Let's set up some 500-point games of Ambush and just see where it goes. And obviously we all had an amazing time. And then it sort of snowballed from there. So it's kind of like, we were playing more than one game in 3 hours because it's only 500-point Ambush, and we were having such a great time with it. And then me being a sort of narrative person, like every game was a continuation of the same story. So it kind of snowballed in that way. And I guess, I feel like that's just kind of there's been an organic thing to it. It's not like we've kind of set out to try and draw people into the game. We've just all discovered it at the same time and had a really good time with it. So I think that's been great.
I think you've done all the right things, Tom, and I did as well, but it took me ages to get round to it. So I think you've done an amazing job. It's a little bit like you're the gardener. You're trying to get, honeybees into your garden, and you're putting a lot of work
to play with,
curating your garden. Yeah, exactly. Same, but I mean, exactly the same situation. And it's taken me a lot longer to get the results you've got. And I think what you'll find, Tom, is because you've got a small core group, as long as you get a couple of people who are passionate, it gets a lot easier to get new people because they'll see a group of people playing the game, as you say, having fun.
Going from
Clem
3
always
to 4
says, right?
is a lot easier than going from 1 to 2.
Yes, 1 to 2 is the hardest bit, and then to go from 5 to 6, it's easier again, right? Because you've got a group of players. So Clem, I think Clem said months ago, he said it's hard to be player number 1, 2, or 3, but once you get past that, if you're player number 7 to join a local community, you can see it's supported. There's this is not going to just go away. So you've done the hard bit, Tom.
Do you know the other thing I think that, sorry to interrupt, but the other thing that I think actually makes a big difference is the narrative stuff, because there were a lot of people who'd bought Kings of War, stuff from the shop. They joined Kings of War fanatics, and then they'd gone and played other games because the other games were the ones that other people were playing. And they, as I say, they didn't want to be the first one, And when I started writing up narrative stuff on fanatics, people were like, "Oh, that game looked really cool. I liked your little story that you told there, And then they got more interested in it, and they wanted to, find out a bit more about the game and so on. So it wasn't just us saying, "Oh, we had a good game and so won because they went into my flank or whatever." It was like, no, the halflings are, defending their town from, these mysterious ogres and stuff, and people, they latch into that. That makes them excited because they want to be part of the world that you're creating.
I think you're totally right, Tom, and I think there's definitely been a massive upsurge in this. It's, much less now on Kings of War Fanatics. It's not, played a fun game last night. We played Pillage and I won 6 points to 3. It's much more, as you described, it's telling a little story with our game, and it's, to me, it's 10 times more exciting. And I think the more people that do this, as we said, with getting players into play, the easier it's going to be to get more people doing it. I think the whole thing is going to snowball.
I think I have nothing against very chess-oriented, I'm playing a tournament or whatever. I enjoy that part as well, right? What was bothering me, and I think we've made a lot of progress collectively lately, is this is not the only way to play the game, right? And so the fact that there is a ton of space for Kings of War to be a very narrative play game, to absolutely not be cutthroat, competitive, or I've only played 2 games, so there's no point in me going to an event. I think that's complete bullshit, right? Like, even if you're a completely new player, you definitely should go to events because the game really works well in that environment as well. And I think changing the mentality and change the image of Kings of War from, it's just a clone of fantasy, it doesn't have any lore, the miniatures are boring, and it's a competitive mindset. This is completely wrong, right?
Yeah,
so we need to slay that dragon, and I think collectively we're doing great on that front, and I'm very happy for it. And Tom, also news flash for you. You're a Pathfinder now. Like, you've been hired. That's it. Like,
I was going to say, Tom, you're doing the work.
Yeah, you're doing the work already.
Fire Mantic an email saying, make it official. Get something for doing it.
I don't want to lose the fun, But
it's not about losing the fun, right? It's just so you gain access to the Facebook group for Pathfinder, so you could chat about it a little bit and see a few more infos about it. Not that much, but it's still interesting. And it's just officializing what you already be doing. And I've been in the same boat before. It's like, I don't need to be a Pathfinder to do what I'm doing, because I'm doing it not for Mantic, but for myself, because I want a good local community.
The only thing I've got to say as well is there isn't that. I know it feels like, oh God, I'm going to have to sign up to it and follow the rules, and it isn't really like that, to be honest. If as long as all Mantic care about is you're doing stuff, which you are, that's it. They're not. No one's looking to tell you off or anything. Do you know what I mean, Tom? It's not. It's a very. Their idea is to support you because we're out there growing the game, right? Which is so crucial. We don't have GW stores, right? We've got a bunch of nerds like us who are passionate about it. So Mantic are trying their best to help us. They've recently rejigged the program, and I genuinely believe it is there to support us in what we're doing rather than tell us off or something like that.
But I think Clem made a really good point, just to go back to how it builds, because that's exactly what Clem described there about looking at the game through a different angle. The competitive side of it still exists, of course it does, and that's great fun for people. But like the other side of it, you want to tell stories, and that actually goes back to what you were talking about, Chris, which is about how you build your army. Like for me, the narrative starts when you're actually compiling your army list, and if you want to make an army that doesn't work in the sort of competitive sense, well, then you can try and make it work. And actually the halflings that I have is a really good example of that, because I just really wanted to paint those dog riders. I thought they looked really cool. And that's how my army started. And then I sort of thought, I'm going to base this town that they live in the town that I live in. And I don't want to give too many spoilers away, because I'm hoping to get something in MUPLore about this, but they're based in my town, which is like the former capital of Scotland, but it's been a bit forgotten about. It's not really. It's got faded glory. We've got like kings buried here that maybe they're Scottish rebellious kings. Do you know? And so I thought really early on, partly because I was playing Ambush, but I wanted to have a narrative reason for why I was playing that Ambush, is that these guys don't have all the flash kind of like technology of an engineering of the halflings, the big armies. They don't have the flyers or the balloons and stuff. They've just got rank and file. So I've created this force, and I've kind of created narrative rules for myself that actually hamper me competitively. But then I saw that when I started actually playing it, I thought, I saw that as a challenge, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it, the list building aspect of it. And I thought, well, my dog riders are getting wiped off the board a bit too easily, so I'm going to upgrade them from into regiments kind of thing, and just see how I can play with them. And I've sort of adapted my play to try and suit the list rather than adapt the list to try and win. I think.
Sorry, no. I just wanted to say, sorry to interrupt. I had a very similar experience with my undeads. And I think it's a very interesting thing. Like, I started. Okay, I really want to build like this narrative for my army. That these are the models I want to use, and I don't care how well they play. Like skeletons suck. No one wants to play skeletons in undeads, right? Well, I want to have 3 hordes of them. I'm gonna have 3 hordes of them. And then I want a dragon, so I'll put like the Vampire Lord and Dragon, and that's it. That's the list. What else can I put around it that kind of sort of make it work and kind of sort of fit in the narrative that I've built for the list? And I wrote the list, and I'm like, you know what? It looks like a shitty list, but I'll play it because that's what I wanted to build. That's the models I wanted to paint. I'll try it. And turns out it's a very, very interesting list to play because it's a lot stronger than I thought it would be initially. Like it really has some strengths that I did not see because I'm not so good at the game, apparently, by looking at the list, I didn't understand the strength of it. And it's also not something that I would have written otherwise if I wanted to write a strong list. And so by putting this set of constraints and when I built the army, I actually created a very, very interesting army and challenge and gaming experience. So fully understand what you're talking about, and I think it's a great way to go with.
This is Max McDougall from McDougall Designs, your provider for all things Mantic and other wargaming products here in the U.S.
And sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think the game supports that, though, doesn't it, Clem? And that's the thing. I think you sort of touched on that when you were talking to Chris earlier, because you can build, like the Northern Alliance, for example, you can construct that list in many different ways to suit the kind of story that you're telling and the kind of way that you want to play. And actually, I found that with the Halflings as well, and all across the different factions, Forces of Nature, there's a lot of different things, a lot of stuff in your toy box there that you can use, and you can use in different ways. And actually, that's one of the things I really like about Kings of War, is that it has that flexibility with the list building where you can actually do some really interesting things. And just from sort of lurking on Fanatics, I can see that there are a lot of people play their lists in very different ways. I know there's an attempt sometimes to try and optimize them for competitions, but just as a newbie looking at it, you can see a ton of variety, even in one faction, and that's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that we've been saying a few times, and I've heard also, like, I think in the content charge, one of the recent episodes, they've also mentioned it, is there's a fallacy of the people say, oh, it's either a competitive game or it's a narrative game, and I think Jeremy probably made that point. I'm not so sure. Jeremy Duval from Counter Charge. It comes from Games Workshop, right? Oh, we have matched play. And then you have a narrative thing. And it's actually, I think it made a lot of damage, right? Because what they call narrative is, oh, we suck so much at writing rules that are balanced and actually work, then yeah, we just throw stuff at you and just do whatever.
We have to pretend it's a strength of the game.
Exactly. Then, well, it's not balanced at all, so you can break it easily, but at least we give you, elements that you can real stories with it, I guess, maybe, because no one actually plays this way. And I think it really hurt the hobby in a way, because people then have this wrong opposition of this game is either narrative or competitive.
And as you say, Clem, no one plays the narrative one, and therefore you end up
it's an awful game. Like, it just doesn't work, right? And actually, the fact that the units are so well balanced in Kings of War, it means if you build a narrative list, like I want to tell this story, I pick this unit, and that unit. Well, because it is a balanced game, this list
you can work. Still win. You can still win.
I think that's exactly right. Valid. I think that's exactly right. And the thing with Warhammer is that they are so protective of their lore that actually you don't have a lot of creativity to tell your own stories within that. So it's a kind of like the narrative games that they have.
It's only going. Sorry to interrupt you, buddy. It's only going one way as well. I mean, we talked about it last month. I'm certain they are going. It's almost like Games Workshop is no longer a hobby, because you are no longer. It's not your hobby anymore. You are buying content from them, which they want to put into basically seasons, like a video game. So you are buying their characters, their IP, they've created this experience, and we are the consumer. We are not. It's not a hobby for us. We are buying their product, and that'll, they'll cycle out the army, and then we'll buy another one, and that's the way it's going to go.
I think it goes down even to the miniature level, and I know that you guys, quite rightly want to encourage everyone to buy Mantic models and everything, but the fact is that if you've got plastic sprues which have separate arms and things, there's all kinds of, even within building those units up, you can make them into much more dynamic poses. You can mess around. You can have the odd person out holding something completely different, and you have a hobbying creativity there. And see, if you try to do that now with GW models, you just can't, because they're sort of
the modern ones. If you lost the assembly guide, you are screwed.
Yeah, but
then you will have the left arm is in three pieces, and it attaches to the head for whatever reason. And then if you try to glue that in the wrong order, it will not fit, and that's game over.
Yeah, and some of them are stunning models, but they're not.
Oh, I love them, but they're not kit bashed ready.
Yeah,
they're a lot harder.
You can't kit bash them, exactly. And I think, like, my latest project, my sort of hobbying thing right now is Varangur. And the reason for that is because I had good and I had a nature, or as neutral is now being called, and I wanted evil. And I thought, what better to have than an human evil, because that kind of fitted with where I was going with it. But of course, there's not any Varangur models out there. And I think when I look at people using Varangur, some people use some Northern Alliance, some people use Games Workshop Chaos, and I was like, I really don't want to have a GW army. So I've been trying to sort of work in Mantic models with some historicals and trying to get some Viking, very Viking-looking things. The Draugr are all undead Vikings and stuff. It's a bit of a project, and I think I've bitten off more than I can chew. So it's kind of ground down to a much slower pace than I was with my previous two armies, but I'm absolutely loving it.
It's a bit more of a challenge from the sound of it, but it's also Varangurs are not Chaos Warriors from fantasy.
Yeah.
They are something else. Like, they are literally a lot closer to Northern Alliance that just happen to worship kind of a darker, older god. Mm-hmm. And so they're not really Chaos Warriors, right?
No,
they're just a bit darker, more eyeliner type of Northern Alliance,
Well, they've got very different. Like, I did actually get some Northern Alliance. I got a really good deal at the local shop for some Northern Alliance, but they just don't quite fit with the aesthetic I want for my Varangur. So I've kit bashed them a bit and put some more Viking-y stuff, some historicals in there. It'll be a long time before I get them looking any good, I think. But I've got this shield wall. They're all coming up the beach like they're on a raiding party. They're all coming up the sands, and I'm really quite chuffed with the basing. But the figures are, don't know.
That sounds really exciting, Tom. Really fantastic. No. It sounds great. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. And that's a big part of the hobby, right? Maybe.
Yeah. And their cavalry is a really, really good unit. It's the Sons of whatever.
Sons of Korgan.
Yeah. Sons of Korgan. But the only cavalry I could get were really small scale. I think they're true 28 as opposed to heroic, or maybe they're even 25. And they just look a bit weedy. And
they're underfed northern ponies.
All I can say is I hope when they refresh the Forces of Abyss, they do the how are they called? Abyssals or Horsemen, like the actual cavalry for the Forces of the Abyss. And I think if we get a good horse model and kind of a rider body, that will give us some, something to chew, and you can modify this to make it look more like a human.
Maybe a head swap.
head swap, maybe swap a weapon or something like this. And I have high hopes. I really hope they do something like this. But yeah,
I'd love Mantic just to do some Varangur, because everyone, when I mentioned it on Fanatics, everyone said, "Oh, just use Northern Alliance," and I was like, "Yeah, but they've got lovely, warm, cozy clothes on and stuff, you know. I want them.
There's also a big issue, right?
Like angry barbarians with rips in their shirts and stuff.
The other thing is, if you play Varangur, it means you are taking cavalry. Otherwise, why are you playing Varangur?
Yeah.
You should be playing Northern Alliance. So obviously you need to have good cavalry models. Like, that's not the only unit you will take in the army, obviously, but you do need to have some good horses. No question.
Listen, Clem,
they're good.
We have an excellent goat in our army.
Right. There's one.
It's one.
now please.
In a very specific pose. Yeah, exactly.
2 regiments, please.
It's a very cool looking goat.
Well, you could try to use you could also try to use the Heliquin from Vanguard, but there's only one pose and it's super static. So,
It's a cool model. I have some of them.
It's a really cool model, though.
I mean, Forces of the Abyss, they do have a cavalry box, right? I think you can still buy it. I have.
Yeah, they're the old Twilight Kin cavalry.
Yeah, 2 or 3 regiments of them. They are PVC models, so nowadays I wouldn't recommend them so much.
Recommend anyone to buy that at this point. They're Clem, we're expecting new models.
No, of course not.
Just to be clear,
right now, yes, absolutely. But if they do these models updated and on a plastic frame, of course, yes, please. You know what I mean? So that's all I was saying. All right.
One thing I forgot to mention, sorry guys, just to shoehorn this in now. Yes, I have asked Quest Hub to order me 2 ambush boxes for the Trident realm.
Nice.
I'm holding out for the 2-player set. So rumor has it it's coming with the Clash of Kings 25. So I'm hoping it comes a little sooner than that. But I'm anticipating Abyss and Trident realms in the same.
That would be the way to do it. Yeah. And if they do that, I know I'll get a couple of these starters. But
Clem, do you want to do a model swap with me? Trident realm for my Abyss.
Maybe so. Yeah,
maybe a swapsy. Yeah, I enjoy a good swapsy. Feels good.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Yeah, Kings of War, what else? Well, obviously I'm painting goblins. I have been painting goblins for a while now. Although lately I've been painting squigs. Because I think I've posted some pictures of the army that I've like the work in progress. For some nostalgic reasons, I have 0 flea bags or mop-ups in my army, and all of them are actual squig models. I also decided it's not a full Mantic army, but it's okay. I'm not going to Clash of Kings this year, so I'm allowed a not fully Mantic army.
Just imagine the look on Ronnie's eyes, when he goes around looking at all the models and just seeing
I would have to hide,
No, you're not getting the special Mantic.
No, I don't get the models.
No model for you.
I love the fact they give you something if you bring a Mantic model. They don't punish, they don't say, no, you can't bring non-Mantic models.
Bring them,
but
sure.
I love the fact you just get a fun little something to say, hey, you bought Mantic, well done.
That's a good point. So anyway, I'm almost done with these guys. I only need to paint 1 Wiz and 1 Giant. So I'm very, very close to 2,300 points. And that's good news because I've signed up for the Kings of Warsaw GT late May. So in 2 weeks now, 3 weeks? 3 weeks.
Can we just enjoy that pun for just a second? Kings of Warsaw. It's just perfect, isn't it? I mean,
it is nice.
It's ridiculous.
It is really nice. I also, I think we should do, Kings of War Community Poland episode MUP short pretty soon because one of the organizers of the tournament, Lucas, works with Berlin regularly. So he comes to Berlin every now and then, and I met up with him and we had a good chat, about the community in Berlin, the community in Poland, and so on and so forth, and how you run events and all the stuff. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Like, they have a really nice group, like good amount of players. As we've seen the last Clash of Kings, very good players as well. So I fully expect to get my ass kicked, but by gentlemen, so that'll be fine. I will learn a thing or two. And so almost done there, and I'm quite happy with it. And the last thing for Kings of War is I finally bought glass shelves, and now I've assembled them as well. So it's made it to the end of the list, and so I've sorted my armies and started to put them on the shelf, and did kind of the same thing as you, Chris. Like look at that project I started, or hey, this one I thought I finished, but maybe I want to get back to it and fix this highlight here and there, or maybe paint a couple more models for this army. And so now I'm looking at my ogres and my forces of the abyss as the stuff that we'll do after the goblins, I think. So pretty cool, pretty motivated by all of this.
I would just say very, very quickly, that's really exciting, Clem. I would just say really, really quickly, going back over my Northern Alliance army has been really, really rewarding, and I'm really happy with how it now looks. I think it is my best looking army, and that feels really good. Feels really, really good. I would recommend, dear listener, don't be frightened to go back to models you've painted before, because you've already made a good start on them. Even if they're sort of painted to tabletop standard. I mean, it was Scott who from Palette of War who came on the pod ages ago now, and it was just chatting to him doing them up short that really made me think about this stuff a lot more than I was already, because previously it was very much I want to get everything done to roughly tabletop standard as quickly as I possibly can, and boom, move on to something else. And it's just thinking about things a little bit differently. So, a model doesn't have to be done. You don't have to say, right, that's done, I can never touch it again. Even if you've sprayed it with the the sealant stuff, you can still paint.
You can still
go back over it. There's no issue. So so I'm really, really happy with how my Northern Alliance now looks, and I get much more enjoyment out of seeing it on the table now. It's very satisfying.
Yeah. Actually, in a lot of cases, it's better if the sealant's sprayed, and you can go in there and do some touch-ups and things like that.
I've really found that, Mark.
There's a little advantage to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting because at the moment on my hobby table, I've got some primed, just human clansmen. And then I've got some human clansmen that I painted, 5 years ago when the Northern Alliance first came out, whenever it was. The models I'm painting new take less time than the ones I've already painted. And I'm not really sure how that is, but that's a thing. But yes, I'm very much enjoying it. It's called
skill, Chris. It's a new thing for you, but it's called skill.
Practice makes perfect.
What about you, Mark? What have you been working on, Kings of War?
Oh, right now I'm working on Riftforge Orcs. But
yes,
I also
happening, Mark. It's happening.
I've almost got that 500-point army done. I'm working on goblins too, much to the delight of Kyle Poole, and Clem was also very excited about that. So I have started that army. Boy, do you have to paint a lot of models, even at minimum model count, to put an army together. Holy smokes! So
they're nice models, and they paint easily, So
oh yeah, they're nice. My biggest problem with that was I did several different paint jobs. Like I had 3 or 4 different ways that I was going to paint them. So they were black, then they were gray, then they were, Wraithbone, and then they were black, and then they were, So I ended up doing a kind of a Zenithal, slap chop kind of deal with them. So, and I also found a skin tone I really like, Plague Bearer Flesh, which is a contrast paint. Really like that color, and it really happened. I just don't like that green, I don't know, that orc flesh kind of green. It just didn't get it for me. So, but as soon
Mine
as I got
are even worse. It's like lightning bolt,
warp lightning,
warp lightning green. Yeah, it's like stupid green. It's like
but they look. Clem, they do look really cool though. Yours do look really cool. You've taken it to the extreme.
Saturated colors. Yes, like my wife is like, you can't have that many colors on the model. Like it looks like a 5-year-old, like eats half of their crayon and use the rest, all of them at the same time on the box. It's like, yeah. And
that's like they say, grow old but don't grow up. That's us. Yeah. And Mark, what's the point level you're aiming for?
Well, you know me, I'm the 500-point guy, but Clem is, and you and Clem, I should more properly say, have got me going to 750. So I'm going to 500, and then I'm working up to the 750s. And one of these days, I'll get one of those armies bigger than that. But that's what I'm working on. Hopefully, long term, my Rift Forge Orcs are going to make it to 2,300 because I need a tournament army besides my first edition Orcs that, I just keep working on. They're still individually based. All my tournament armies are individually based. I got to get out of that because typically when I travel, I borrow an army. So I'm not bringing my army with me.
That's also a good way to do it. I have a trick for you, Mark. Just make 3 times a 750 army for a given faction, and boom, you have 2,300 more or less.
There you go. All right.
It's just 3 small armies.
Sorry, Tom, while we're talking about multi-basing, what have you done for the bases on your models? Have you done individually based or have you done multi-basing?
Multi-basing, I was so excited to try that. Something that was totally new to me. But yeah, and it's how the game plays. So I was not. I think it didn't take me very long, put it that way, to be converted to multi-basing. And what I tried to do with the first few units is, because I still play a lot of tabletop role-playing games and so on, is to try and get some of the figures magnetized so that you can maybe take off 2 or 3. And of course, then I had to give them all names. So, I've got these named characters in my units. There's actually a halfling with a blacksmith's hammer who I'm currently playing in a D&D campaign she's in the back row of my halflings. But yeah, I love the multi-basing. And with the halflings, it was, again, first time doing it for years, but I was just getting flock and making it grassy, and then I added a few rocks, and then I added some levels with some cork and so on, and now with the Varangur, I'm having a bit more fun with that, as I say, with the beaches and so on. But it's brilliant. I don't think anyone who really embraces the multi-basing in Kings of War, I don't think they would ever go back, because
it only took me 3 armies, right? So I also got to it pretty fast. But the first faction I had was the Forces of the Abyss. Mm-hmm. And I had them from Vanguard initially, so I thought, I want to maybe keep some from Vanguard, and maybe I will play them in a different system, who knows, blah, blah, blah. Like painting a full army, so much time investment that I want to put only in one system, so, And then I've done the same for the Ogres, because they were also a Vanguard army initially, like a Vanguard warband. And then I've done it for the Night Stalkers, same thing, thinking, I'm sure I'll play them for something else. And if you guess how many times I've taken them outside of the tray to play with individually based models, 0, like not a single time.
I would say with Ogres, though, it's slightly different because they're bigger and you've got your units of 3. So in my Forces of Nature, for example, like those Earth Elementals are incredible. I don't know if you saw my post in Fanatics about this, but those Earth Elementals, the box art goes nowhere near doing those miniatures justice. They are fantastic models. I think they must be old metal sculpts or something on the box art, but the actual resin sculpts are fantastic. And they come, obviously that's a unit of 3 for a regiment. I'm not going to multi-base them because those are such good models. I need to use them in other games. Even if I don't ever, I love having the idea, the option of doing that. So those elementals and my air elementals I've kept as 3 figures, because it doesn't take that long to move them, does it?
It also works absolutely.
Yeah, but I love those regiments, I've not got to hordes yet, but when I do, I just love those big units, those big slabs of figures that you can move around. And for that reason, even though I've kind of embraced multi-basing, I still try and keep the model count quite high, because for me, the immersion is so good when you're playing with them. You're playing a proper rank and flank war game, and you've got that scale and everything. I imagine it must be the same when you're playing with smaller scale, Clem, because then you're talking about big bodies of soldiers, and I just
small scale is even worse, like even more of that. That's what I really like about it. I agree. I'm the same as you. Like, I cram as many models as I can on my bases. I tend to make them less scenic, because I still want to have a shit ton of models on the base.
Yeah. I think that the halflings were my first one, and I did full model count on that. So there isn't much basing going on there. But what the assembly, well, I should have made them sharp sticks because there's probably they've got phalanx and so on. But I just really like the idea of having a rabble, like a militia that are just come, they've all got different hats on and stuff, and it just looks really cool. And you get them with their weapons above their head and everything, and it just looks like this kind of unruly militia, and it's
almost like this mob of villagers they've rounded up.
Exactly, and that really just spoke to me, and I thought that's really cool. And so I think I've ordered another ambush starter set so that I can make one that's a bit more military with the spears, because I want that to be like, maybe they're the guards or whatever, and the town, and they're just a little bit more
more orderly, right? Like that, the spears aligned a bit more, and
exactly.
They know what they're doing. They're not just vicious villagers protecting the town.
But having said that, I do kind of want to, there was a wargaming show in Scotland this weekend called Carronade. It's in Falkirk. And Falkirk District Wargaming Society run this every year. They have a ton of different indie stalls and stuff of people that have printed off and made their own things and stuff. So I bought some little bits and pieces for the basing, and I've got these nice little old-fashioned lanterns that I'm going to use for that. So they're going to be like, I'll maybe do a bit more of a cobbled base for that, like cobbled street with some lanterns on it. I think that's going to look really cool. That's
really nice.
Yeah.
So they've kind of rallied at the last minute to protect their village or their town. It sounds really cool. Hey, one thing I did mention actually that did make me chuckle a little bit was the Countercharge Northern Alliance Army Review, and they were talking about the Hearthguard Regiment. And they're saying, oh, but wouldn't it be cool if they weren't just the humans? They also had the other races from there. It's like, and they were wanting Mantic to do something about it. It's like, you don't need Mantic to do, just glue the models on, buddy. Just go, you don't wait for permission. Just do it.
Models.
Just do it. Yeah. Super. Very good. Shall we?
I think that's us for Kings of War and Pannilore. So now it's Pannilore, isn't it?
Now it's Pannilore.
Turn it over to Chris.
Yes. So, dear listener, there was a bit of a mix-up, entirely of my making. So we were going to do the Night Stalkers, then we changed it to the Trident Realm to fit more with sort of what's hot with the Mantic, what's going on.
To be fair, the initial idea was we're going to record in May, and in May there will be Night Stalkers in Warpath. We absolutely love this idea. We'll jump right into it. And turns out things seem to be slightly delayed, and so we thought, okay, let's keep the Night Stalkers for later, and instead focus on what we have right now, which is the Froggies.
Froggies.
Then Chris got
Chris is very invested in. I mean, Chris, I've got to say, I am very busy at the moment, though, in my defense. I have a lot of stuff going on. So, okay, but I can tell you a little bit about the... shall I just do 2 minutes on the Night Stalkers, and then we can talk about Trident Realm?
Please tease us, and then next month we'll get back to it when we have them in Warpath as well.
So, Night Stalkers... So, we... Right, so I'm sort of in two minds about this, right? So the Night Stalkers, Tom, do you know much about the Night Stalkers?
Not massively, no. I would be lying if I said. I mean, they look cool.
They look very cool. I think they definitely had the very cool idea for the army, which is very unique, and then they came up with a story later, I think. And it feels kind of a little bit half-formed to a certain point. So it all comes back again to the, was it called the God War, where there was the Oscar, the splitting the Cerulean mirror.
Celestial Wars.
Yeah, the Celestial Wars, all that stuff, right? The baddie who tricked the elves to make this magical mirror, right? So there was this, fancy elf university city with lots of mages and such. And then the mirror was broken, and they were sort of, their souls, they were off, sort of in the warp a bit, a little bit like Warhammer. And
in the void, not the warp.
In the void, exactly, buddy, in the void. And they were basically trapped there. So they're sort of elf spirit, basically elf souls who are now trapped. From my perspective, I didn't necessarily need another thing to go back to this one bit of time again, right? Because if I'm remembering this right, the abyss was created from this war, right? And to me, that is sort of bad. That's bad bears enough for this one particular story. That is pretty epic, and there's this great sort of wound down the side of the world where it's basically a portal to hell, right? That's bad enough, right? So we didn't need another evil faction. And it seems to me like, for example, scarecrows. Why are they scarecrows? Just because they look really cool, and they do look really, really cool. But I must confess, and maybe this is a little unfair, maybe I read through it too quick, but I feel a little bit like I really like the Night Stalkers, but I don't need them to be elf souls. I would prefer it to be like it's a time of great.
Wait a second. I don't think they are elf souls, are they?
I don't think so either.
So I think what the story is, there's a parallel plane, like the Void, and the entities in there are the Night Stalkers, and they feed on souls. And the elves from the whatever university city that's fucked around find out, right? And basically had the souls torn apart and thrown into the Void. It's kind of something else, like it's a plot by those evil entities in a way, but they are separate things.
This is Ronnie Renton, and you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
I need to check my sources then, because I think so. I didn't read the book. I being quite
for me, it's
completely
like,
honest.
So
I watched is it called Alvarius, or there's the YouTuber who makes the videos? I just watched the like a 10-minute video on it.
Oh,
yes, Alvarius. Yep.
Yeah.
So I remember reading about the stuff when we did the Twilight Kin lore, and because there's a bunch of explanations around this. And
right,
I think
totally. And that was, as you said,
They make it, from what I remember, relatively clear that the Night Stalkers are separate entities from the elves and from the souls. And so the Twilight Kin, they go and explore the Void to kind of save their old kin, like the poor elves that were sucked into the Void a long time ago, and they try to reconstruct and recover their friends. And in the meantime, they get corrupted by all the entities, and they turn themselves into psychopaths to survive navigating in the Void. But these are two different entities. And what is not 100% clear to me, and I need to read more about in the lore, is exactly how the Void manifests. Like, obviously, the Twilight Kin do bad stuff around it, and they're a big source of incursions from the Night Stalkers. But it's unclear to me how the Night Stalkers, in and of themselves, can manifest in Pannilore. Under which circumstances, or is it just because you have a wizard that again does bad things, or
I know they're
like a goblin wizard does stupid things and opens a bit of a portal to the Void? I don't know.
They're attracted to strong emotions. Hopefully that's correct. That bit is correct. So different
that sounds
kinds,
right.
Yeah. So different kinds of Night Stalkers are attracted to different kind of psychic events or something. So some are attracted to fear, some to, if there's a battle or something, they'll be attracted to it. So there's sort of primal human emotions attract different kinds of Night Stalkers, which I think is actually very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite nice. I mean, I like that they have a relatively unique style for the models, right? And
I love that about them. Yeah,
what
absolutely.
I think is the success is they've managed to create their own identity, like visual identity, and at the same time, you can clearly tell that originally they kind of have like the Cthulhu horror style of stuff that is kind of connects to it or adjacent to it. And so if you really want, like if you have a really cool D&D model like a Cthulhu horror stuff, you can most likely proxy it into a Night Stalker army and it will just fit right in. And I think from a modeling perspective, that's a pretty cool idea, pretty rich thing, that they both have their own and you can bring in third-party stuff and it will fit quite well. So yeah.
And the Mantic line is great. Thanks, Clem.
It is.
You saved me from quite the disaster there. Sorry about that, guys. I was fully intending to read the book, but I just watched the YouTube video. So I'm fascinated. Maybe it was an old video. Has it changed since then? I'd be interested to. I need to look into that.
I don't know. Maybe you weren't paying attention. Who knows?
Entirely
we'll have a look at
this.
That's your mission for the next month's league, Chris.
Where did it go so terribly wrong last month?
I mean,
well,
next
hopefully.
month. Yeah, we will have the Night Stalkers in Warpath next month, and we will talk about them.
We can go over it again.
Yes.
Well, and see how the lore changes for that. I mean, is there any changeover, or is the void in between the world of Kings of War and for Deadzone Firefight? So
it'll be really interesting, won't it?
It's going to be very interesting to see if they tie them together or not.
I often wonder, is the world of Pannilore, is that a planet in the GCPS? Things like that. Is there that level of overlap? Be interesting.
No, I was going to say the interesting thing about it going into the Warpath universe is where the Nameless sit there. Because when you were talking about Clem, when you were talking about Cthulhu and the sort of the kind of dark abyss aesthetic, that's very much where the Nameless sit already in the Warpath universe. And I guess that I sort of saw the Nameless as a kind of cross between that kind of abyss thing and more like the Trident realms, like the water thing. See, I'm doing a segue, guys, into the Trident realms.
Nice.
but I think that's I think that the lore around them coming into the Warpath universe is going to be really interesting because they'll have their own distinct place in that universe, and that might actually then reflect back on Pannilore. Where does, obviously they're not connected, but it will make people just, I think, see them perhaps in a new light in Kings of War.
It will enrich what they are about. I think so. For me, the Nameless, what I know about the lore and the models and so on, they look to me like they are the good guys.
Mm-hmm. They are very sympathetic.
They kind of look like the scary monster, but I absolutely imagine Bob.
But we're the real monster, Clem.
You know what I mean?
Human heart.
The GCPS,
It's the huge cephalopod with tentacles instead of a face and blah blah. And it's actually Bob, and he's a lovely guy. And he's just going to battle to defend his home planet or his home environment because GCPS is trying to build a toxic mine there, and is normally very kind, like a being, but he has to fight for survival. Mm-hmm. So for me, the Nameless are not. So they borrow from that aesthetic of horror and deep sea monsters and so on. But
actually, they couldn't be more different. The Night Stalker's lore versus the Nameless, they couldn't be more different, really.
But in a way, I think that's what I mean is that the Night Stalkers will bring an interesting counterpoint to the Nameless in that way, because I think for a lot of people, they look at the models and they go, oh, these are scary monsters. When actually there's a much more interesting aspect to them, which is what you've just outlined. But I think in a way that might also inform the way we think about the Night Stalkers as well, in a really interesting way. I hope so, because
I'm with you. I think that's a great point, Tom.
I'm like you guys in that I don't think of them as evil and good, really. I think they've all got their corner to fight, and I think that's already there in Pannilore as well. It's just that, I guess, there's people do a lot of shortcuts and they complain about a lack of lore, but that's just because they've not gone looking for it,
Yeah, if you don't read it, obviously there's no lore, right? It's right. Very easy to just skip this. Yeah, no, that's pretty.
Well, and also every being and stuff in the universe isn't a biped. You know what I mean? They don't look like humans or a human spinoff. I mean, like Clem said, Bob is. Just going to work every day, and somebody's messing him up. But so Bob looks different. That's
poor Bob.
Yeah, poor Bob.
So after the disaster of me doing the Night Stalker's lore, guys, come on, tell us about the frogs. Come on.
Well, we'll do even worse for the frogs. But first, I wanted to mention: didn't we say we would shout out to the Warpath Wiki? Yeah, Mark, you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, Dave Heads definitely shout out. If you've not listened to the MUPLore episode, please do. He makes a little appearance there and tells you a little bit about the Wiki. So go check that out. And he's been focusing on Kings of War, and he's made, what did he say, 13,000 or 3,000, some obnoxious number of changes to the Wiki. And, good for him. I've been enjoying the stuff he's been posting on Facebook. It's been outstanding. So I'm glad he did it. And now it looks like he's going to be trying to take on Warpath, Firefight, Deadzone lore. So,
and I think there was
also
also
the Wiki, so
like a call for collaboration, like participation. So if you're interested in the lore and the Warpath universe and want to contribute to the Wiki, you're more than welcome to just
honestly,
step forward.
You just want to help out, right?
Right.
Yeah, just get involved, like do cool stuff around the game and around the lore, and it's open, and so step forward and come help.
Yeah, it's Wikipedia for Mantic games. It's just all it is what the community creates out of it. So, and if you want to reach out to Dave, he's all over Facebook and any of the Mantic stuff playing, but just send him a messenger and he'll get a hold of you, recruit you, and stick you in there. So, and if you don't want to do that, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with him. So, because Dave has joined the MUP team.
Hey,
nice.
Fantastic. Super. So come on, guys. Let's just do this.
Frogs.
Wrap this up in 3 minutes. Frogs.
So I'll be honest, I failed to read the PDF, like the recent PDF they've done, but I had the big green book, so the first big third edition book while traveling, and so I read that part, and I have to be honest, it was not very inspiring. So I hope there's more lore in the recent Froggies PDF.
Right.
I think there's an inevitability that the lore is going to develop quite a lot with the Trident Realms, and the reason for that is that the establishment of the Trident Realms is these three kingdoms, all with these kind of mythical kings at the start of them, but all of those are under the oceans, and they worship.
Yes.
Their focus is on this big deep and everything. And now they've just released a whole bunch of figures that are amphibians and they don't live in seawater. And so actually the whole notion of the Trident Realms existing across all waterways, up the rivers, into the lakes of the actual the giant lakes in the middle of the nations and stuff, or the ice plains in the frozen north and everything, that suddenly becomes much more interesting and more active because they've got these models that kind of force the story to develop.
I think so. When I read it, so it's not that many pages to begin with. I think there might be books about them that I haven't read, like actual novels.
Drowned Secrets. They feature very heavily in Drowned Secrets.
I haven't read that one yet. But what I wanted to say is the impression that I had was they're kind of the antagonists. Or they gave me the impression that, they're kind of like the animalistic, spirits of the water type of thing. And what do we know about the Trident Realms? Well, we know about them when we go and fuck around lakes, and suddenly fish people come and fight us.
If you pee in the pool or do fishing, too much fishing,
you build your house on water.
They're kind of vengeful.
And so what I'm saying here is we don't have direct stories from them. We know about them from the other's perspective, and it's kind of the same for the Night Stalkers, right? Like, what does a Night Stalker think about? Who knows?
Yeah, we joked about this before, right, Clem?
But I think what
does a butcher do in his spare time? He doesn't really have any spare time, just butchering.
Right.
It's more butchering. He just dispels. So, there is he just manifests and then disappears.
I think Tom made a really interesting point about them focusing on the frog stuff, who are far more kind of involved, because their life would be more in Pannilore, because for a long time I thought about the Trident Realms as being in their impregnable cities under the sea, and they might come up and, go and have a battle on the land, but ultimately they can only be defeated so much, right? They will always be the aggressor because their cities are under the sea, are completely safe. No one can realistically get to them.
Yeah,
right?
I don't really see a
Knights-
salamander assault one of their cities, right? Like they will drown.
I can't imagine the
and
halflings with fish bowls on their
solidified.
heads or something. We're trying with breathing. It's just that's not going to go well, right?
Yeah, so in that sense, there is absolutely kind of a difficulty in, okay, I want to play a battle halflings against Trident Realm. What's going on here? Like, you need to think about it. And then it's most of the time, it's more the halflings are near a lake or body of water, and then stuff happens, right? And it's and so automatically it puts the Trident Realm more as the antagonist than as the protagonist of the story. That's what I wanted to say from the lore perspective, and that's when you read about it and when you try to, create a more established lore, like a more fleshed out lore, it's a bit more of a difficulty, I think, to do that.
It's the same with Forces of Nature as well, but I hope they get. I mean, obviously, if Basileans go cut down a forest, right, for the trees, right, obviously nature is not going to like that. But I do want it to be a bit more nuanced than that. Tom?
Yes, sorry. Just building on that, Chris, I think what we're looking at is not just about seeing individual factions and, what their place in the lore is actually the whole direction of Pannilore that we're looking at now. And the Trident Realms coming out now is not an accident, because I feel like we've seen the development of Forces of Nature. Obviously, the Herd is something that's not really been supported for quite a long time, but I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see the Herd getting talked about a bit more as well. And there was a really interesting interview with Ronnie on Countercharge where he sort of talked about where he saw Kings of War going. And it got me quite excited, I must admit. And that's because instead of looking at these forces as neutral, it's very much about nature, and it's exactly what Chris was saying. Is if civilization is destroying the natural world is going to start fighting back. And to build on your point, Clem, if the Trident Realms have kept to themselves and that they're not being invaded per se, but there is an interest in them redressing the balance. If there's a lot of, not pollution because it's not industrial particularly, but there is a lot of, if you look at the halflings, they're getting a lot more machines in there. You're seeing a lot of machinery coming into the armies and so on in the
just colonizing areas, right? Like
colonizing areas,
establishing a fishing village.
Exactly, and if you look at Armada as well, there's obviously warfare going on at sea and everything, and it actually does make sense for these realms to start to fight back a bit, and actually having amphibians, as I say, into the actual the nations, the sort of Pannilore itself. Does make sense if they're wanting to just have that little bit of a fight back. So I think it's not just about looking at the Trident Realms as a sort of one-off, but it's about looking at it in the whole of Pannilore and the direction that's going. And I wouldn't be surprised if the sort of next big story arc, if you like, across Pannilore has this kind of nature, Trident Realms, a storyline to it, a kind of a force, almost a fight back of nature itself on the various different races and on all the destruction that they've wrought upon Pannilore. I certainly hope that's the case, because that would be really cool, wouldn't it?
It sounds like an interesting thing, and to me it also brings another interesting dimension, which is the same reason why I love having Night Stalkers in Warpath. Is I love the Plague as the antagonist. Like, they're brilliant. They are very rich story-wise. You can do a ton of things. But having another antagonist in the universe that is quite different in how it operates and the archetypes of stories you want to tell with the Night Stalkers compared to the Plague, I think it's a very rich thing. It just gives you more opportunity to play cool games. And I think in Pannilore you could have the same thing, right? Again, it's always very boring to say, oh, these are good, these are evil, then fight. No, there's a lot more to it, and I'm not just saying, oh, there's also neutral, so they could do either side. It's meh. But to have a slightly richer story and then you can absolutely tell much more interesting stories where, the Trident realm, or as you mentioned, nature and herd, maybe also have kind of a different point of view on events in Pannilore, and therefore when you play games, you can just use that dynamic to create cool scenarios and tell cool stories.
And they're always about balance, but I think all of those nature factions are about balance. But the sort of risk with balance, and that being your motivating force, is that there's a risk that you become quite passive then. And obviously if you're writing a story, you don't want
reactive, Tom. Very reactive.
Yeah, you don't want a character that doesn't actually take action. It's like you're never going to have an antagonist or a protagonist that doesn't take action, because that doesn't make for an interesting story. And
Tom? Hamlet?
Yeah. Well, I would. Yeah, Laertes is the real person who takes action.
Is he actually? You're right. Hamlet is actually not he's probably not the most interesting character in Hamlet, is he?
And I think, but then in a way, that's what Hamlet's about. But you're getting into my my drama school training there, so I'll not bore everyone with that. But I do think what's interesting in the terms of Kings of War is by making them amphibians, they are automatically making this faction more active. They're more of a
they're the neighbors, right? Like, it's not to get some fight with the frogs. You don't need to go really, really, really bad where you summon a coral giant, which but doesn't happen all the time, right?
Yeah,
you
but
can
it's
have skirmishes
not even...
all the time with the frogs.
Yeah, but
they have much more agency in the world, right, Tom? They're more involved. As Clem said, they're your neighbors, right? Maybe there's a massive pond.
But it's not even the proximity, though. It's the fact that they're actually releasing this range, which means that the Trident realms themselves are training up frogs because they want to get active and they want to be involved and they want to impact on Pannilore itself. They might start, they might start working with other factions to try and stop, like maybe this city's growing too quickly. They're polluting the river and the Trident realms have had enough of this, because that's eventually ended up in the sea. So they've actually developed, amphibian and frog soldiers to get involved, to get active.
And something you've mentioned, Tom, is maybe they're even being more proactive. Maybe they're trying to seed the conditions for more rivers or wetlands or whatever. To maybe they're trying to expand rather than just constantly be on the defensive. Clem.
Oh, that would be cool.
Or maybe it's also angry because I'm sure they taste delicious, like the big frog is. So, there must be some, ambushes locally, like, you ate Bob, he was a nice colleague at work, and now we have more work to do. You're going to pay for that,
Bob was delicious with garlic. You'll be delicious too.
Tastes like chicken, just a bit more bone to meat
ratio
than
had frogs'
chicken.
legs. They are pretty similar to chicken, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. They taste like butter and garlic.
It tastes like butter and garlic. Brilliant. Boom.
It's like snails, right?
Same as I had snails, exactly. Yeah, boom. Butter and garlic, delicious.
Guys, I can imagine a really good siege scenario where the Trident realms are besieging a dam to try and open up the river again.
Oh, that's such a cool idea.
And you have like some dwarves or whatever defending this dam. How cool would that be?
That's a super cool
also
idea.
halflings. I could see halflings. Like the dam is to capture the frogs, because obviously the halflings eat the damn frogs, right? Like, you don't have to be a Frenchman. If you're a halfling, you also eat frogs.
But also the halflings would be completely dependent on the dam for energy for their war machines, so they would be totally desperate to keep it. But guys, I'm sorry, we touched on it a little bit, and I'm just going to have a little moan. Like this idea of, the good neutral evil. Why would a goblin and an abyss, or a goblin and a night stalker be in the same bucket? They've absolutely nothing in common from any perspective. They'd have no reason to fight together. They shouldn't be in the same boat. The bucket system should be more complicated.
It's just an anthropocentric thing, right? If you're Basilia, well, you are good because you defined I'm good. It's me, so obviously I'm good. And then anyone that attacks me, and that could be Forces of the Abyss, the goblins, sometimes the ogres if I don't pay them more than my opponents, blah blah blah. All those guys are evil because they attack me.
I think it should be more like one bucket should be like civilized, settled, that kind of thing, rather than anyway. I know
goblins are civilized.
Just do away with the buckets. I mean, the sworn enemy of the Varangur are the Abyssal.
Actually, there is no, Tom, that's a great point. We don't actually, if we don't have allies, we don't need the buckets anyway. And allies is, I know people say they're doing it for narrative reasons, but all my narrative, ice elementals or whatever, really?
I can write any story I want. If I want to play my salamanders with forces of the abyss as friendly unit, as a friendly detachment, like I've done 3 weeks ago, I can come up with a bullshit story that explains and justifies it, right? Like, there's nothing against that. You try and prevent me from doing it, And so I agree that there's no need for the buckets. Like, no allies.
The game is much more interesting when you have to actually account for the weaknesses in your army. It's interesting that not all the armies can do all the things all the times, and that's why the game is fun and interesting. The dwarves are really slow, and they're good at strong armor, etc. But you've got a certain play style. If all the armies can do all the things, the game is less interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of allies at all. So I like it. And Kings of War is so balanced that you don't need them. So it's nice. Even though your army can't do a certain thing, it doesn't mean it can't win.
It's part of the fun of the game, right? And if you don't like that, it's not your play style. You should be playing a different army.
But if you want to play an army with mixed up things, those do exist. You have the forces of nature, have salamander and naiads in it. So you can find it. You probably can go out and find an army that has already those kind of like those things built in. The Northern Alliance is another great example. Like, you can have half elves, you can have dwarves, you can have the alliances are already there. I don't see why. Like, the only reason you would be getting alliances probably is because you want to nerf out some particular unit. Or, as Clem says, you've got a really damn good story for it, in which case, fair goes. I mean, like, as long as it's fun.
Yeah, but I mean, you could just do that. Yeah, among us, we could do that. Agree to do that. It's no problem. You don't have to necessarily take it to a tournament, right? We can just.
Yeah, I think it's
absolutely. You can do anything in your basement. So,
Mark, don't be naughty.
I was going to comment, but thank you.
Super. Okay, guys. Fair enough. Well, I think we very poorly covered both types of lore there,
We've
guys.
done a great
coming back next
style
month.
job next time. Or please tell us how wrong we are.
Rage-inducing. Absolutely. Yes. That's that email address to your listener is Clement.
Right.
There you go. Dear listener, would you like to come on MUP and do Pannilore? Please reach out to us, and we'll be very happy to have you do a guest spot. So.
Absolutely, that's a good point. Tell us everything about Trident Realm.
Right, come on, guys, let's do listener questions.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So, Bob Nelson, with the current trend towards narrative, do you think it may be an idea to have a lore council alongside the rules council to guide the direction of the canon for Pannilore? So, I mean, basically, it seems like a pretty standard Mantic idea, right, to have committees for things of volunteers, which on the face of it sounds like a good idea. Could someone explain to me what the difference between a lore council and the rules council might be? I guess the rules council is obviously the rules committee, so there would be a lore committee alongside. On the face of it, this seems like a very good idea, right? I'm not sure Mantic maybe wants ownership. Yeah, maybe they want to keep ownership of their IPs in terms of coming up with the story.
Well, I can tell you a couple of things. So back when the novels first started coming out, and I was on the narrative workshop over at Countercharge, etc. There was the starting of the lore committee, and that was more so to coordinate everything so that the lore stayed consistent. And I don't know if it's still official or not. Matt Gilbert is the overlord of the lore. So
yes, from what I understand, in Pannilore, he really knows everything is in his head.
It's all in his head.
For it. But also, when we had Winterstar in an episode, they also told us the author of the novels that get published, they talk, right? They talk with Winterstar They talk with Mantic, so there is some sort of coordination here already. That being said, I love the idea of like a lore council, like kind of another entity of volunteers associated with Kings of War and Pannilore that would really push forward the narratives, the aspects, and come up with cool scenarios, cool campaigns, and really help this type of gaming thrive. I think all the ingredients are here, and I think, yeah, that would be pretty cool. Tom, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you, mate, because I really don't think a lore council is the way forward. I think that one of the strengths of Kings of War, and of Mantic, in fact, is the giving the players ownership of the game. And whilst that works really well for a rules council, because you want the game to be balanced, I think the lore of it is better served when, like they did something similar with Deadzone, and I just missed this, and I don't know if it happened in Firefight as well, but they set up the kind of the overarching story, which came from Mantic itself, and then they let the games in the campaign play out, and then that affected the sort of overall narrative of the world of Warpath, and I think that's the model. Like that to me is a very exciting model, because every time you play Kings of War or whatever game it is, you feel like you're taking part in, you have ownership and you take part in the narrative. Right. And I think they could take that further. Like rather than having a committee that have a sort of gatekeeps the lore, I think in a way, you want to empower your players to say, every battle that you have, even if probably at tournaments to start with, but then even further, if people are coming up with good ideas and everything, and God knows there's a lot of really good ideas out there, why not make that part of the overall sort of world? And I one of the things that attracted me to Kings of War is being able to write my own stories, because there are other providers that don't let you do that, as we've mentioned earlier. So yeah, I kind of resist the idea of a committee that could sort of gatekeep the lore. I think it would be better to open it up to everyone. And then obviously it's Mantic's final say. Like people might come up with something rubbish and they could ignore that, and that's fine. I trust them to do that. But like having that empowerment of feeling like you're part of the bigger story when you play games.
I'm Brandon Rossbond of Winged Hussar Publishing. So much universe, so little time.
So, Tom, I think that was a great point, and I very much enjoy an unexpected disagreement. So thank you ever so much for that. That's always a lot of fun. So, here we go, dear listener. It is the Tales from the Warriors Hall is the podcast we were talking about earlier for ages without remembering the name. Thank you, Mark. Super. So I think, Tom, you make a really, really good point. So I think, at the moment, there's plenty of room for Mantic to come up with stuff and for us to do our own things, right? We're in a really sweet spot. Tom, so let's have a quick little think then. So I really like your point there, but how would, let's say, for example, Tom, you're doing your Varangur army, right? And you're coming up the story of your Varangur army. At the moment, that's really just kind of staying as your story, right? So would it be good if there was a facility that you could somehow feed that information back to Mantic? You give them the data, and then they do something, they do something with that, and maybe your army, if it's a really cool idea, very interesting stuff, somehow gets added to the official canon. We've talked about this before, right? Where I've messaged Mantic and said, hey, we're going to have this massive battle somewhere. Would you be happy to add it as a footnote that at such and such location on the map at such and such year, this battle was a thing that happened, right? So it becomes a historical event in Pannilore. Would you be interested in kind of giving that feedback to Mantic to kind of build on this?
Chris, I think that's a great idea, but what I would say is it wouldn't necessarily work to that granular level, because if we all got our wish and everyone started playing Kings of War, then it would just be completely unmanageable for everyone's army to get a shout out, everyone's individual stories. But I think what there should be is space for people to create their own stories, but then feed into a bigger meta, if you like. And I think there's a sweet spot that you could get where Mantic isn't promising a shout out for everyone's individual armies, much as I'd like my armies to be mentioned in a novel or something. That would be cool. But I think more realistically, it's about them saying, right, you say I'm playing the Varangur, and all of the Varangur armies in the world are winning a lot. The rules committee will take that away and say, well, maybe they're a bit overpowered, But then also at the same time, Mantic would go, well, on reflection of that, let's say the Varangur have increased their influence, and that maybe the Northern Alliance are under threat. So you've got both things happening simultaneously. Does that make sense?
Okay, so Tom, I think, that makes a lot of sense. So I think what could possibly happen then is, let's say tournament organisers, etc., are submitting the results of the tournament through, they're using the Mantic Companion, right? People are also submitting results of their games into Mantic Companion. I never bother, but I guess people do. So we have that data. So let's say in your example, we know that at the moment, Night Stalkers are doing really well, Varangur are doing really well, and then we could say, okay, they are ascendant in the story, and we can make a little story. Maybe Free Dwarves are not doing so well. Maybe we do something with that. I think that's a really cool idea, Clem.
Yeah, like little noise that informed the big picture decision. I think you convinced me in the sense that what I had in mind with the lore console is absolutely not like a gatekeeping thing, and I think we've mentioned several times what I love about the Warpath universe, for example, is that there are big gaps, big enough for me to create whatever the fuck I want. And what I expect from the lore is not to tell me, oh no, you painted your miniature the wrong color. Like, it shouldn't be that shade of green, it should be a different shade of green. It's like, no, I prefer this one. Like, please let me do what I want. What I want is seeds of ideas and like starting points so that I can throw my imagination on top of solid foundations, or foundations that allow me to go in any direction that I want. And so I don't want someone to tell me, well, that's exactly how the Forces of the Abyss are, and that's the only way they ever will be, right? I want to hear generic principles, like big ideas, like archetypical fights they've been involved in, and maybe I will pick one bit of story there, pick one bit of story in that other place, and then make my own sauce. That's what I expect from the lore.
So, Clem, they would be more of a source of inspiration. They're not gatekeeping, but they're maybe creating little bits and pieces that you, as a hobbyist and a gamer, can pick and choose what you want.
But on a flip side, though, imagine, Clem, if you had your Forces of the Abyss, and you played in a tournament, and you won against all the odds against someone with a really good army. And that was reflected, maybe not directly in the lore, but the lore then said, Pannilore, the Forces of Abyss have come up and they've started causing absolute havoc, in the home counties. And you knew.
I'd love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you knew.
Yeah, you've done your part.
Yeah, you did a part in that. That was me. I did that, And it's that sense of ownership. It's like almost a two-way thing then.
Yeah, in that sense, I fully support it, yes.
From what you've said, though, Tom, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't do both of those things at the same time, right? Clem's idea plus your idea. There's no reason why you couldn't do, and in fact, I would say it's probably very desirable to do both of those things, make both of those things happen, right?
Yeah, because then you've got a give and take, haven't you?
Yeah, totally. I think that would be really exciting. I mean, I think from our perspective, I mean, as you say, Clem, like in the Warpath universe, you can fly a massive spaceship through the holes that are there at the moment. But perhaps it would be great if there was something, some committee, some volunteers to, bounce ideas off and come up with little tidbits for us.
I don't necessarily need a committee. I'm not certain that it needs to be.
I mean, we're calling it committee because
it could just be like the wiki, like the volunteers. Like, I can tell you what we've been starting to work on locally, like for the local group, is to create our own path of the corner in the Warpath universe. And so Vince has been working hard to, create a star system someplace with several planets, describe how they're built, like what they're like, and what's going on those planets, what type of terrain they actually look like when you play a battle there. And it's kind of like the background for our own games. And the idea is also for this, we will build terrain pieces that fit this star system, like these few planets. And when we play games, or don't play just general Firefight battles or Deadzone battles, we play in this particular environment, right? And so, and this, we don't need a committee to tell us, hey, let's do this or let's do that. We'll just create our own thing. And so I think the only place where I could see a lore console be useful is if they give kind of big directions or like some seeds of ideas, and then everyone can just create their own thing on top.
Clem, it's not quite the same thing, but what I think about is Rob Berman's brilliant short stories in the Warpath universe. It's not so much that he was, in any way a committee, but he was someone who wrote this amazing story that inspired me to then take that and go do my own thing with it. So, it's interesting. I think Tom's made some really interesting points. It really does depend exactly what the role of this committee might be. And I think we all agree the one thing we definitely wouldn't want is people to gatekeep the story.
If someone tries to tell me, hey, you haven't painted the right color, or hey, you can't make this type of army build, it makes no sense. It's like, yes, I can. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Super.
Anyway, good question. Great question.
And we've lost Mark, and I've got to be honest, guys. I have a very early start, so if you guys were okay, I would just
skip
do
ahead.
listener questions and skip topic of the month.
Topic of the month is it's a great hobby. We love it, and we'll talk more about it another time.
There's a lot of stuff we can do. Exactly. We do another time. Or if you two want to do topic of the month,
I think we're on 3.5 hours already. We'll be good.
We've already talked about it anyway.
And we will again next time anyway.
Absolutely. Super. So next question, Mikey Jenkins. Hey, Mikey, what do you think the direction will be in regard to Vanguard? In what ways could they revitalize and or rewrite it for an eventual re-release? I feel like we've talked about this on the pod a load of times. So I was very much for making it into basically fantasy Deadzone, and we were calling that Warhammer. We were calling that basically Kings of War Champions, weren't we, Clem?
Yes, that was the name we used.
But something I haven't talked about it particularly with you, buddy, over the months. We already have Deadzone. Deadzone is great. Do I also need fantasy Deadzone, or if I want to play Deadzone, I could just play Deadzone? So perhaps actually having a very crunchy role-playing game set in Pannilore, that's something very different to what we already have. So perhaps that is more interesting. Clem kind of won me around on this. Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to basically back that up. I mean, Deadzone is a really shooty game. And one of the reasons it works so well is because of the shooting and the exploding eights and so on. And I can't see how that would work as well in a fantasy setting. I mean, you could do something similar in terms of the movement and stuff, but you would still want to really focus up that hand-to-hand melee kind of attacks. I think something more narrative-based would be more interesting, and that's kind of, so I'm agreeing with you basically, is I think that there's space for a kind of more role-playing scenario-based thing where there's a bit of narrative, and it's almost like
campaign-based.
A campaign-based sort of co-op game or something like that. I think would be really cool.
I think, did we talk about it already, or was it some conversation I had in my head? I can't remember, about taking the miniatures from Dungeon Saga Origins and then playing an actual real war game, skirmish game on a 3x3 or 2x2. And so the idea is...
I think we have mentioned it on the pod before, yeah.
Right, like the idea is you buy Dungeon Saga Origins and you have a few miniatures like this, and then these guys... What can you do with these miniatures later on? Well, maybe they could have an actual profile in a skirmish game that would be played on a 2x2 or 3x3, and it's kind of a step up from there. So that could be an interesting thing. And again, I think, I know people hate all the tokens that are needed, and maybe some stuff could be streamlined a little bit or like cleaned up a little bit. But I think having slightly more complexity than Kings of War in a skirmish game like Vanguard actually makes sense. Actually cool to play.
And also, they've created an entry point to Kings of War now in Ambush.
Right, Tom. Great point, Tom.
It doesn't need to play that role anymore. I think
that's a crucial point.
Vanguard was supposed to be the entry point to Kings of War, but it didn't work as that. I never played it, so I can't speak to the rules, but I do know that Ambush is a fantastic gateway into Kings of War, because that's exactly what I've just been doing. And playing 500 points of Ambush teaches you the rules of Kings of War, so you're not even, you're not having to make a jump from one game to another. It's all
you're
there.
already playing the game.
Great point.
You're already playing it, and
Exactly.
it does play a bit like a little skirmish game, because you've only got a few units, and you've multi-based them anyway. So it plays a little bit like a skirmish game, but you have flanks in it, so you've kind of got the best of both worlds. And I just don't think Vanguard is in that space anymore. So it's about, okay, if you accept that it's not anything to do with Kings of War, entry into Kings of War, what can you do that's interesting with it? And
the
I
beauty is it can totally be its own thing, right? It doesn't have to try and serve as the entry into Kings of War, right? It can be its own thing, and whatever that means,
Agreed.
Great. Yep. Good stuff, guys.
Next question, Chris.
Adeptus Tamicus is asking, what happened to Dreadball? I own Dreadball, and I've never played it. I think it all comes back to Blood Bowl exists and Blitz Bowl exists. So everyone that's ever played Dreadball always says to me the game is amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. But unfortunately it's just one of those situations like where there's 40k. People very, very rarely play the alternatives to 40k because 40k is just so big. Sadly, people just, people rave about Dreadball, but it's very, very hard to get anyone to play it. I mean, you can see nowadays that a lot of the models are pretty derpy. They are very old fashioned.
It's also hard to get the models, right? Like, it's not just as hard to play. Like, where they don't even sell it anymore, do they?
No, not really.
So
it seems.
Yeah, so I think that from my perspective, I've never played it. I'm not really interested in fantasy football anyway, so that's not necessarily something I would jump on. But I fully support it. Get the Armada treatment, puts the teams on the vault, or maybe not in the actual vault, like in the monthly subscription, but let us buy the Dreadball teams, like on my mini factory. Boom, I give you 15 euros, whatever. Give me all the SCLs to play one team, and then I just make these guys, and there's the rules for free on the companion. Boom, that's it. That's what I want.
Tom.
I mean, I've never played Dreadball, but as somebody who does work in sports, I don't really understand the comparisons with Blood Bowl, because it doesn't look anything like it. I mean, the sport looks completely different. It's more of a sci-fi setting for a start, and it also it looks more like Speedball. You remember there was a video game called Speedball?
Speedball 2. Yes, one of my favorite games. Yes.
Yeah, I had it on the the Master System.
Oh, interesting. Hey.
Anyway, that's what Dreadball looks to me to be like, and I think if there was, if it was available and people were playing it, I would probably pick it up because it looks pretty good. The people I know who have played it really love it as a rule system, and being Mantic, I can believe that. So in a way, I think it's a real shame that it still to this day gets compared to Blood Bowl, because it doesn't look anything like Blood Bowl as far as I'm concerned. It's a completely different game. But I guess in terms of I think in the Venn diagram of nerds who play war games and nerds who like sports is a very, very small crossover, and those people probably play Blood Bowl, and actually the market for a game like that is probably not massive, and I think that's partly the problem.
I mean, they have to focus. It's a small team and they can't do everything. I mean, for me, there's ball in the name, so therefore it's a football game. You know what I mean? And that's about as far as I've gone with it.
Yeah. Although I would just add quickly that one of the games that got me into tabletop gaming was called Guild Ball, and that was a skirmish game that was, fantasy soccer. It was really successful until the company just killed it and said to everyone, well, we all knew it was going to end at some point, guys. It's been a hell of a ride, so no big deal. No
hard feelings.
No hard feelings. Yeah, exactly. We're not supporting this anymore, but you had a good time, right? Well, it lasted. But no, I mean it's a really tricky one. I think you guys have made a lot of good points. I mean, if Mantic were to update it, Mantic from 2024, not from 2016 or whenever it came out, do we legitimately think that it would be more successful than it was because it wasn't successful enough to sustain it. Interestingly, there is a novel coming out, but I know the novel was written a really long time ago, and it's been bumped many times, with the scheduling issues they've had, etc. So I think that's just a can that's been kicked this far down the road. I don't think that necessarily means there's anything happening behind the scenes, if I'm perfectly honest. So as Clem said, look, Mantic can only do so much. They're bringing The Walking Dead back. I do sort of feel like at some point there's a good chance they will do another version of Dreadball. I could see it, maybe a Kickstarter, something like that, something where they're going to guarantee they're not losing money on it. What's the end goal for it, really?
Yeah, I think when you discontinue a board game or a war game or whatever, it doesn't just disappear. People still have it on their shelves, and I feel like the people who love Dreadball will have it on their shelf, and they will get it out and they will play it. And actually, the possibility of expanding that market is probably not massive, and so therefore, why would they do a new edition? I think. It's not a video game where you just switch the servers off, Like, if you've got a physical game, people play it,
I think what would be cool is to still make it available to new people coming in, because if you're new to tabletop gaming or new to Mantic games today and you're interested in Dreadball, well, tough luck. It's too late. It doesn't exist anymore. And so how much effort would that be for Mantic to put the rules somewhere on the companion, or even sell the rule book somewhere, because they can maybe have another print run of it somehow.
Just sell a PDF.
Just sell the PDF somewhere, put the STLs on My Mini Factory, and then it's minimum investment for them, and it's just building a long tail source of income from assets they already have. Because right now, I agree with you, the market is most likely tiny, but they're getting none of it. You know what I mean? Whereas if they just put the PDF out there, publish the STLs for maybe not all the teams, just enough so that you can play it, and then maybe they would find a few fanatics that would keep the game alive and do like a rule committee for Dreadball and publish an updated PDF or FAQ once a year or whatever, and the involvement from Mantic could be almost zero, and yet they still maintain a healthy community.
I think that's a great idea, Clem. I think that's a fantastic idea. And what would be super, super cool is if they have in the game, they have like the big things are called giants, right? It would be super, super cool if they announce this and then just put into the vault for that month a new giant sculpt. This is a new character with new rules. Just to give something new, just something a little bit new, because there are a million Dreadball teams, there are loads of different teams, but I'm sure you're right, guys, that the people that play this love this game, right? And they probably have all the teams played it, that at this point there's very little new variation happening, I'm sure of it. But I think that's, Clem, I think that's a really smart idea. And who knows, maybe if there's suddenly a big uptick in things, maybe they notice, we're selling a lot of PDFs and STLs recently. Maybe there's more interest.
Time to, let's print a 2-player set and that's it, right?
Right, exactly.
And in the meantime, they can just keep it on the back burner, sell 1 PDF a week, and that's it, and it's almost no effort.
It's the Mantic way, I would say, because if you constantly rebrand and reissue games, you start becoming a bit more like another company. And I think that serving your fans, serving the people who love the game, and just keeping it ticking over is a much better way of doing it. And they keep creating more universes with so little time, but with the same small team, and actually, how do you support all these games going forward? You can't just keep reissuing them. So I think that's a really good idea, Clem.
And also the other thing I think that really killed it was, unfortunately, Overdrive. Overdrive, I think, is a really good game that we've never played, by the way, dear listener. I painted up all the models and everything. But it did really badly. I think it's a great game, great models, but it was not successful for Mantic.
Yeah.
And so, it's looking at that from, if Ronnie's got that on his desk, hey, how about we redo Dreadball? Well, we kind of tried it recently with Overdrive. I mean, it was always I always felt it sat in a weird spot because it was kind of like, is this a new Dreadball? No, it's not a new Dreadball. It's not replacing Dreadball, but it is a very similar thing, right? So I think that would have been almost the soft launch for a new Dreadball. If that had been super successful, that's definitely where they'd have pivoted. But it wasn't. It was very unsuccessful.
I mean, I'm trying to think about it from a business perspective, right? And so, do they have the manpower to come up with another set of boxes and put them somewhere in the warehouse and, upfront it, or like organize a Kickstarter campaign to it? I don't think so. So and if they did, I would rather have them focus on Vanguard, if I'm very honest and kind of selfish about it. So if I have to arbitrage the resources.
And you guys have backed Warpath, right? Epic Warpath.
Yes.
You don't want them suddenly dropping the ball and going back to another thing. This is the thing. You want them to focus their efforts on the games that you really want to play right now. And I just feel like, there's a risk to them spreading themselves too thinly, because we want the games that we like to be really cool.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, or we just have to have Mantic keep growing and be a larger team that can do several things in parallel. But I think there's only so much growth that you can have and still be a healthy company, Like, I also don't want them to become a big behemoth, and also don't want them to grow too fast and just hit a dry spell and just crash and burn.
Clem, I worry about them growing too fast. Yeah, I worry about they have some real success with something, hire a load of people, and then hit a barren period. But I think that gets much less likely as they add things like the Vault and things like that, right? Where they've got a steady income stream, because you're not going to have, not every new game release is going to be an Armada, right? You're going to have an Overwatch. Right. And that's not, I don't want to say bad things about Overwatch, because I'm really excited to play it. I haven't, but I know it's a great game. I'm certain it is. It's just it wasn't financially successful, unfortunately.
I think this is the risk of Halo, though, just on the back of that, because if Halo does really, really well, but then those players don't translate into their other games, you could see Mantic expanding quite quickly to cover that growth in Halo players. But then if there's not the longevity around that, if they don't keep playing, if they don't keep expanding it, or if they don't move on to Deadzone and Kings of War and so on, the risk is that then that growth is not sustainable. So yeah, I guess.
Great point, Tom. I wonder if Clem, I'll just say quickly, I wonder if I have no idea, but I wonder if that's what killed Spartan Games, who had the Halo license originally. They didn't survive. Clem?
No, I just hope that Ronnie knows what he's doing and, rolls the dice in the right direction. But anyway, I think we're quite off topic from what happened to Dreadball. Interesting off topic, but yes.
So, guys, we've accidentally introduced what I would compare to a chef's table in a restaurant, right? Where rich people can come and sit in the kitchen of the restaurant while they're running around cooking the food, and you sit there and, the chef sucks up to you and that kind of thing. Because we've sort of accidentally done that with Steve Hildrew, where Steve will come and join us for a podcast recording, but then he'll just do hobby. He's not really doing the podcast. He's just sort of listening to a live recording of it while occasionally insulting us, right? So we've got a similar sort of situation going on now, dear listeners. So our good friend Dave, who we mentioned earlier, who's handling all the wiki stuff, and God bless you, Dave. So he's just written a couple of things in the chat regarding things we talked about earlier. So I just wanted to mention. So we talked about the idea of a lore committee, which I think we're a little bit suspicious of this idea. But what Dave's mentioned is, so he cites a couple of examples of which I cannot possibly comment on the validity. King Thorimus, Moonweaver, Leafblade. Anyway, he's using fantasy type words, and I'm sure he's 100% right. He's made a really interesting point. The council should be less about law and more about keeping it all aligned. And I think that is a great point, and that is the challenge of all of this, right? It's just keeping everything honest and aligned, so it all makes I think that's a great point.
That's an interesting aspect. To be honest, I find it almost funny and almost like a good side if there can be inconsistencies in it. It's like I'm a big bullshit talker, right? And so when I bullshit stuff, sometimes I contradict myself, and that's part of the.
And sometimes it's gold, Clem. No, but also
Exactly.
we can easily explain that, right? That's just Basilian propaganda. No, it wasn't like that at all. Are you kidding me? That's not what happened. We can do this all day.
Real history is full of inconsistencies because it's written it's written by different people.
Totally.
It's like
who are incredibly biased.
Of course, every single book that's ever been written, including religious texts, have been written by people who have got their own agendas, often which contradict themselves even within the same book. So I think it's absolutely fine. Like, it's absolutely fine that people have got their names wrong, or things have been interpreted in different ways, or maybe that person didn't really die. That's absolutely fine because that happens in real history.
But
and
also,
it's
even
rich,
just the people reading the history, we have our own biases that reflect what happened, right? So, let's think about, so for example, Nixon, in the White House, those calls were all recorded, right? And yet these characters are all still massively divisive, even though we have the recordings of the conversations, right? So, imagine, if something was written by a dwarf, 500 years ago, my goodness me, in a form of dwarvish which maybe doesn't exist anymore, needs to be translated into Elvish and then back into a different language. It's going to get very messy. Super.
Next question.
I'm definitely not talking about Dreadball now.
The Mantic Universe Podcast. So much universe and so little time.
John, read the next question, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. I've scrolled to the wrong part of the notes. I'm struggling.
I can do it.
Yeah, go for it, buddy. Go for it.
I can feel you're getting tired, but to be fair, it's been a long evening. Sabertooth Creations, what do you think are the greatest units in all of Kings of War factions? And what is the best overall gameplay unit, and then best looking aesthetically model? So, for me, what really got me into the models and like to go past the Kings of War, like Mantic models, pictures look not so great. For me, was the Molochs that I really love. They're kind of goofy, but they're my type of people. Like I bought the GW Stone Trolls that are made on order because they look goofy as hell, but that's what I had when I was a kid. And so for me, that really speaks to my heart.
Is it almost like a little bit of Confrontation, that aesthetic?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Which was a French game, very stylized. Yeah.
I just love them.
A lot of flair.
Exactly. So those ones, that was my entry level. And then, well, since then, there are a bunch of other models that I really like, obviously, but this one is my starting point. Best gameplay units. That's a tough question. I like when a unit comes with a challenge, like it's and to be fair, most Kings of War units, they do have this. They don't max out all stats, right? Like either cheap or they're strong or resilient. So like it's always a good trade-off because the game is balanced. That being said, I think of all of the units that I've seen in game, the best one ever is the Snow Foxes. Like if I could choose just one unit, like a special tournament when you have one unit and you put 2,300 points of that unit on the table and try to win games with it, I would take 2,300 points of Snow Foxes.
That's really interesting you've said that, Clem, because when you look at the stat line, it doesn't look that impressive. I would have thought, but gargoyles have fly. But all of those keywords fit together so beautifully. So they're stealthy, they've got vicious, they've got pathfinder, they've got nimble.
They're cheap and you shouldn't care about them, right? I can ignore them and then they charge you in the butt and you regret it.
And then they kill a horde of, a legion of bloodworms that's holding your entire battle line. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, Snow Foxes. And then I will not go through all greatest units in all of the Kings of War factions because we don't have time.
Let's pass over to Tom.
Yep.
And Tom, interpret this question however you like, buddy.
Well, I was going to say I've not probably not played enough to speak on this with any authority. So I would say that in any given time, my favorite unit is the one that I've just finished, because I always get so excited about wanting to get them on the table. So, and also before you've actually played with them, you can see the possibilities, but you don't necessarily see the flaws, and so they just seem kick-ass, you know. And so I mean, pretty much every unit that I've painted, I've just thought this is the coolest thing ever.
Until they disappoint you and betray you on the table.
Exactly. But then actually, some of them come round as well. I want to give one example, which is the Halfling Feastmaster, which I took as my hero at 500 points because he's got throwing cleavers, and who doesn't want throwing cleavers? And then he was just really not very good. His aura, he didn't have an aura like the sorcerer does and stuff. But he's come back round because now he's just such a good hero, and I've used him really well. So he got absolutely wiped out in the first couple of battles that I had, and now he's been really, really useful. So he's great.
Chris, what about you?
So Tom, I really liked how you approached that, answering that question. That was really cool. Yeah, I love that. The one I've just finished, or possibly the one I'm just about to start, that's the one. That's the perfect time, isn't it?
The next one, I promise. Just the next one. Just one more.
Just one more. Exactly, Clem. Exactly. That's kind of the MUP approach to models. My perspective, I mean, the one unit I love the most in all of Pannilore is Ensnarers, Horde of Ensnarers. I just love them. I love the theme. I love the rules. I just love that. And I think that's a big part of why I love the Northern Alliance so much, is I still get to have my Ensnarers. So that's super cool. Funny, this is not really answering the question. Do you remember, Clem, we got at Clash of Kings, was it last year or maybe in Cardiff, we got a couple of sprues of halflings. And actually, today it occurred to me, do you know what? I could just sneak a couple of halflings into my Northern Alliance units. Because, sure, why not? Why couldn't halflings, just like everybody else, find their way to the north, right?
That would be really cool. Just stick a scarf on them, Chris.
Exactly. I was thinking about just
put one somewhere and then play Where's Waldo,
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, something kind of weirdly similar, actually, Clem. Yeah. I mean, I was going to maybe green stuff a cloak on them or something. I don't know. Keep it simple. But so in terms of favorite, definitely my favorite unit is definitely Naiad and Snarers. I really like. I think my friend Andrew mentioned a little while ago. He said, a really good Kings of War unit is a unit that in certain, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he basically said a unit that in the right situation it can be absolutely incredible, but it has really massive downsides, right? And a good example of this is the Twilight Kin mutants, where if they're allowed to just run rampant, they'll kill everything, right? But if your opponent knows how to deal with them, suddenly their downsides are in massive flashing neon, right? It's the same maybe with Frostfang Cav, where 30 attacks, my goodness, this is the scariest unit, this is going to kill anything. And then you go, but it's speed 7 and it's hitting on 4s, so it's swingy as anything. It's on that massive base, but again, it's why Kings of War is interesting. It's being able to either prevent our opponent using these really scary units, because all the armies have amazing units, right? How do both players deal with these things to whether they're effective or not? Tom.
Yeah, just to go on to the aesthetic side of it, I think those skiffs of the Night Stalkers, the new skiffs that they brought out were really cool. And I've seen some nice conversions of those as well.
And that's why you've brought a whole army of just those, right?
No,
it just looks so cool.
Yeah, I did, when I first saw them, I thought, I'd like lots of those, but then I've moved on to something else. But I think the other thing that people think of when they think of Kings of War is the giants. So I think we should probably give them a shout out, especially the Northern Alliance giant, because, even people who never played Kings of War, they talk about that model and how cool it is.
It is a very emblematic model. That's absolutely true. Yeah, I agree.
The Northern Alliance dragon chimera thing is gorgeous as well, actually. That's absolutely amazing. And it's super cool. It has a lady on there, not a man. Sorry, it's very late and I'm very tired, so let's not get into that conversation too deeply. But anyway, that's cool. That's cool. Everyone be quiet. Trent. Hey, Trent. Lovely to hear from you, buddy. Our friend Trent. Are you excited about Halo Flashpoint, and have you seen the Fallout show yet? So I think we've talked about this.
We've covered that.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say is, am I excited about Halo Flashpoint? For the game itself, not really, but for getting new people into the game, into Mantic games, definitely. And as quickly as I possibly can, I'll be going, yeah, this Halo game's good, but come and meet Dr. Lucas Koinya. He's a wrong 'un. Because frankly, but it's interesting. I'm much more invested in the Warpath universe than I am the Halo universe, it turns out. So there we go. And the Fallout TV show, yes, it's amazing. It really is an excellent piece of TV. A very, very, very enjoyable. Yes, very, very good, with very dark comedic moments, as you would hope for that property. Martin Hawke, hey Martin, yes, competition winner. What next faction do you want to see remade or created for Kings of War in the future? Tom, can I throw that one over to you to start?
Varangur. As I've already said, I just think there's a really narratively, the Varangur are really good. I'm so disappointed that every time I see them played, it's old Games Workshop models or it's Northern Alliance models painted a bit evilly. And I think that they could do something much cooler with that, like some really nasty-looking berserker, barbarian humans. And actually, Mantic haven't done a lot of humans. I think it's about time that they started doing some humans. Pannilore is full of them, but we often see proxy models for humans. And I think a really good Varangur force, or any of the other humans, but obviously from a personal point of view, I'd love to see some nasty. And the other thing is, the Varangur have got some really interesting units on that list that are just not represented in any Mantic models at the moment. And you've got, monsters and, the different kinds of units that they have, and the cavalry, as Clem pointed out earlier. I just think that you could create a really cool looking set of plastics for Varangur. So that's what I'm going with.
I'm 100% with you on that one. The other good part about it is I'm sure with 2 plastic sprues they can cover that very well. Meaning they do 1 cavalry unit and 1 humans, and that's it. They can do really complement the existing range quite well, and that's what we need. Like a Reaver / something else, human like infantry kit. And mounted zones or Night Raiders cavalry type, and that's it, right? That would be. I'm with you on this one. What about you, Chris?
We have knights, don't we? But we don't have other kinds of cavalry. We don't have other kinds of humans. We have lots of knights. So.
Right, and they're not really in good recent plastic shape, right? Yeah. So I want to see a nice sprue and tons of additions in the vault. I think that will be very successful. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, so Varangur hasn't really been mantified yet, right, as we call it. And I think actually it's in quite a tricky spot because I think Mantic would say, yeah, but we have Northern Alliance. But it feels like something else, a very different play style with different units. Well, yes, there are crossover things. You can have a Cavern Dweller in both or Frostbound Cavalry in both. To me, it feels like a very different thing. And I love this idea of, still worshipping the old gods, the evil gods, basically. It's cool, right? And I wouldn't play my Northern Alliance army as Varangur because I feel like it's a different thing. I think that the tricky situation Mantic have is that there are so many human kits on the market. It's very hard for Mantic to maybe make money on it. They definitely need a modern Mantic cavalry kit that could potentially be used in different armies. I think that's a glaring gap in the line, to be quite honest, whether it's, as we discussed earlier, right, there's this, if you had some sort of, evilly looking cavalry, I'm sure they would be very easily usable in many different armies. What do we think in terms of an army being remade? I've got to be honest, it's not my thing, but I do think Basilea wasn't quite, I know it was done a long time ago, it's not quite right. there's, you can see beautifully, like, for example, our friend Steve Hildrew painted up a beautiful army of those. But, as he said, they're a pain to build. There's weird stuff going on. They're very monopose. Basileia, to me, is it's supposed to be one of the poster child factions, but it isn't really. And if it's played, it's not the men, it's not the rank and flanks. People tend to play the flying angels, maybe the ogres, but to me that's not really the essence of the army. It just simply wouldn't be. There are only so many Celestians, right? They're basically from another dimension, and we're not getting any more of them ever. How often would you ever see an entire Basilean army of these flying battle angels, which are in very, very short supply? So I think thematically, I don't like that particularly, and I don't think it's particularly fun to play against either, to be quite honest. Our friend Manuel had an army of it, and I was sort of like gently trying to discourage him to bring it. But so I think Basileia just needs a rework, and I really like the idea that there's sisterhood, and I'd be, if they had a really nice sisterhood sort of sub faction, I'd be really interested in doing that. Quite frankly, I think that would be super cool, and I think it would be potentially a very different play style to other Basilean stuff. So it's not my thing as much as Trident Realm is, or Naughty Elves or whatever. But I think in terms of Mantic just shoring up their line, I think it's important that Basileia has a good as the poster child, has a good range, and I don't really think it's not terrible, but it's not quite there.
No, they can take with a major redo. So I agree with you, and I'd be happy to see them in the major faction redone in 25. Like the big thing that gets a lot of kits, like the Forces of the Abyss, I think is this what they will get. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I think that's I agree with you. Like I think Varangor, they can do a great job with just 2 sprues, like what they've done for the Trident Realm. Like one new ambush box with 2 new sprues, and that's about it, right? Updated boxes, or for Varangor's new boxes, because you can't buy an army box of Varangor's today. But I agree otherwise that Basileia also have a key role to play in the universe, and they deserve like an update of some stuff. Absolutely.
And they're kind of linked, aren't they? Because if we want to get to people using Mantic armies now, and we want to move away from proxies, then Mantic need to get into gear when it comes to humans, I think. Like it's such a vast race across Pannilore, and yet there's still this kind of but it's quite a competitive market, and we don't want people to use proxies, but we also won't make these models. So in a way, it's just about getting their
saturated market. Not so much. I can tell you from my wife trying to build her Northern Alliance army, because she wanted to make it an all-woman army. It is not easy to find actually good, models for this. And so if Mantic revisited Basilians and did some good sprues of Cur Panther, like good sisterhood models, I can tell you from having tried to buy sprues of similar stuff, there aren't so many out there on the market. Like, I found a few of them, but it's not so great. Same for 3D printing. There are some options, but they're not that great. So I think that's definitely something where they could shine and do a very interesting release that occupies a spot that isn't that crowded after all.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd like to say as well, I think that's a great point, guys, is one thing is, think how exciting that would be if next year the new 2-player starter set is new Abyss versus new Basilean. Wow, that would get me so excited. I'd love that. And I think it would show, because the Vanguard box set was those 2 factions, right? And I think it would just show how far Mantic have come in the last few years, because I think they've come a hell of a long way. I'd be really excited. I'd definitely get that box set. But the other thing I'd say is, we're talking about, there's lots of different reasons / excuses why Mantic haven't done a human line. There are lots of different potential humans in Pannilore, right? There's the successor kingdoms, there's loads of different stuff, right? But I think they should stick to the example of the Northern Alliance clansman figures and be bold. Like whatever they're going to do, whether they're going to do Basileans or whatever, don't just make generic human models, because I don't think that'll sell. And I think that was probably the mistake they made with the elf refresh of a couple of years ago, where the models were okay, but they were trying to fit it with the old 10-year-old stuff. And honestly, I wish they'd just chuck that out and just go, no, this is new, exciting stuff. Look what we can do now. And they were perfectly fine looking, but they're just too generic looking. I mean, you know, I just
make a statement. Make
a statement, Clem. Make a statement.
I agree,
Exactly. Be confident. Be confident. You've got great, talented people doing this stuff. You've got good ideas. Be confident. Yeah, as Clem said, right? Make a statement. Like we trust you.
You could do that with Basilia, though. You want an army where someone looks at it and they go, "That is a Kings of War army." Not that's a generic.
Absolutely.
That's not a generic knight.
That's it, Tom. That's it, Tom.
That's a Kings of War army.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what that is. Yes. So I think they've really got to think very hard about the essence. You know, I love the sort of Byzantium-esque style, but it's got to be an army in Pannilore, not. This was kind of half a 40k idea that we've put in. You know, do you know what I mean? I mean, the Basileia, you can say it's a religious, you know, sort of. Yeah, I mean, I think Mantic have just got to really, as they did with the Northern Alliance, you know,
I think they have a very solid foundation for it, though. Like, I think yes, it needs a refresh, it needs an expansion, and it needs to go one step further. But I don't think they need to. Erase everything.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Clem. But it's got to reflect. It's got to reflect in the sculpts and the army, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I already kind of like the range. I think I agree with you that the Eloi probably should be a unique entry or something. Like it's easy to limit, right? How many you just take in the list, and kind of encourage people to make more meaningful builds. Like it's actually an infantry army, right? Or maybe they can have some cavalry, some chariots, whatever, but not just like all flyers.
I'd say it's a combined arms army, as you like, a mixed arms army, right? So you might have a few angels, but they're the really special stuff, you know. As you say, Clem, you know, you might have some chariots, some cavalry. They might have some great cavalry, because obviously the faction, they've got tons of money and resources, right? So they should have the good kit. Right.
Yeah, and I think they can also come up with cool rules like, inspire fervor into the humans and give them different effects. Or there's ton of stuff they can do and make it really. They are Basilia from Pannilore, and that'd be exciting. Another thing we haven't mentioned, obviously, is the herd and forces of nature, because I think there is an interesting thing they could be doing there. But I'm still, on the bet that we placed a few months ago that this is another big thing they have coming. So I won't even mention it, because I think that these might already be coming. So let's see.
Super, guys. So as ever, it's always the months where I think maybe tonight it'd just be a couple of hours. You know, they're always the ones that go and go and go.
Sorry, that's probably my fault.
No,
it was great. It was a good time. I mean, it was a couple of hours twice. That's it.
2 times 2. Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for staying with me to the bitter end, and thank you so much, dear listener.
Thanks for having me on as well. Cheers.
It was a pleasure. See you next time.